Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 1. The Supreme Reality. The process of living has the attainment of the Supreme as its purpose and meaning. By the Supreme is meant the Atma. All those who have grown up in the Bharatiya culture, the Bharatiyas, know that the Atma is everywhere. But when asked how they have come to know of this, some assert that the Vedas have taught them so. Some others quote the Shastra texts, and some others rely on the experiential testimony of the great sages. Each of them bases his conclusion and proves its correctness according to the sharpness of his intellect. Many great men have directed their intelligence towards the discovery of the omnipresent Atma and succeeded in visualizing that divine principle. In this country, Bharat, they have evidence of the successful realization of the goals placed before themselves by preachers, pundits, aspirants, and ascetics when they tried earnestly to pursue them. However, among millions of men, we can count only a few who have been able to visualize the universal Atman. No other living being has been endowed with intelligence and discriminative faculty, heightened to this degree, in order to enable it to visualize the Atman. This is the reason why man is acclaimed as the crown of creation, and why the Shastras proclaim that the chance of being born as man is a very rare piece of good fortune. Man has the qualifications needed to seek the cause of creation. He has in him the urge and the capacity. He is utilizing the created universe for promoting his peace, prosperity, and safety. He is using the forces and things in nature for promoting his happiness and pleasure. This is approved by the Vedas themselves. The Vedas are the authority for the faith of millions. They are the very words of God. The Hindus believe that the Vedas had no beginning and will have no end. God speaks to man. They are not books written by authors. They are revelations conferred by God on many inquirers of the ways of earning the supreme goal. They existed before they were revealed as valid paths. They will continue valid even if man forgets the path. They did not originate at any period of time, nor can they be effaced at some other time. The dharma which the Vedas allow us to glimpse is also without a beginning or an end, for it refers to the supreme goal. Of course, a few may argue that though it may be conceded that the dharma relating to the supreme goal has no ending, surely it must have had a beginning. The Vedas declare that the cycle of creation and dissolution has no point where it begins and no point where it ends. It is a continuous wheel. And there is no change in the quantum of the cosmic energy, either increase or decrease. It is ever the same, ever established in itself. The created and the creator are two parallel lines with their beginnings unknown and their endings incomprehensible. They are moving at equal distances from each other, ever and ever. Though God is ever active, his will and the power behind it are not clear to the human intellect. The Supreme, according to the Bharatiyas, that is, the inheritors of Indian culture, is vastness itself. It rises to the high skies and roams free in that expanse. It was declared in clear terms long prior to the historical period. The study of the concept of the Supreme and the propagation of this concept suffered serious setbacks in the course of history. But it has confronted each of these with success and is today asserting itself alive and alert. This is proof of the innate strength of this revelation. the conceptions of the supreme goal as laid down in Judaism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism endeavored to subsume into their categories the Bharatiya concept and transfuse it as part of themselves. Still, it did not accept an alien status in its own birthplace. On the other hand, it clarified to those religions themselves their own concept of the ultimate, and emphasized the unity of all viewpoints, and established cordiality on the basis of the absence of difference. While the stream of knowledge regarding the supreme goal discovered by the Bharatiya saints flowed on, the concepts of the other faiths remained as pools beside it. In India, or Bharat itself, many sects were born like mushrooms from out of the main faith. They tried to pluck by the roots or to cause mortal damage to the basic concept of Hinduism regarding the reality, the supreme. But as in a terrific quake of land, the waters of the sea recede, only to return with thousandfold fury, roaring back upon the shore it had seemed to quit. The stream of Bharatiya wisdom was restored to its pristine glory when it rose above the confusions and conflicts of history. When the agitation subsided, it attracted the varied sects that distracted the mind of man, and merged them into its expansive form. The Atma principle of the Bharatiyas is all-embracing, all-revealing, all-explaining, and all-powerful. Developing faith in the Atma principle and loving it earnestly, this is the real worship. The Atma is the one and only loved one for man. Feel that it is more lovable than any object here or hereafter. That is the true adoration man can offer to God. This is what the Vedas teach. The Vedas do not teach the acceptance of a bundle of frightfully hard rules and restrictions. They do not hold before man a prison house where man is shut in by the bars of cause and effect. They teach us that there is one who is the sovereign behind all these rules and restrictions. One who is the core of each object, each unit of energy, each particle or atom, and one under whose orders alone the five elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, do operate. Love him, adore him, worship him, say the Vedas. This is the grand philosophy of love as elaborated in the Vedas. The supreme secret is that man must live in the world where he is born like the lotus leaf, which though born in water, floats upon it without being affected or wetted by it. Of course, it is good to love and adore God with a view to gain some valuable fruit either here or hereafter. But since there is no fruit or object more valuable than God or more worthwhile than God, the Vedas advise us to love God with no touch of desire in our minds. Love, since you must love for love's sake. Love God, since whatever he can give is less than he himself. Love him alone, with no other wish or demand. This is the supreme teaching of the Bharatiyas. Dharmaja, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, as depicted in the Mahabharata, is the ideal of this type of lover. When he lost to his enemies his vast empire, which included all India, and had perforce to live in caves among the Himalayan ranges with his consort Draupadi, she asked him one day, "Lord, you are undoubtedly the topmost among those who follow unwaveringly the path of dharma. Yet how is it that such a terrible calamity happened to you?" She was stricken with sorrow. Dharmaja replied, Draupadi, do not grieve. Look at this Himalayan range. How magnificent, how glorious, how beautiful, how sublime! It is so splendid a phenomenon that I love it without limit. It will not grant me anything, but it is my nature to love the beautiful, the sublime. So here too I am residing with love. The embodiment of this sublime beauty is God. This is the meaning and significance of the love for God. God is the only entity that is worth loving. This is the lesson that the age-long search of our Bharatiyas has revealed. This is the reason why I am loving him. I shall not wish for any favour from him. I shall not pray for any boon. Let him keep me where he loves to keep me. The highest reward for my love is his love, Draupadi. My love is not an article in the market. Dharmaja understood that love is a divine quality and has to be treated so. He taught Draupadi that love is the spontaneous nature of those who are ever in the awareness of the Atma. The love which has the Atma as its basis is pure and sublime. But since man is bound by various pseudo-forms of love, he believes himself to be just a jiva, isolated and individualized, and deprives himself of the fullness and vastness of divine love. Hence, man has to win the grace of God. When he secures that grace, the jivi or the individual will be released from identification with body and can identify himself with the Atma. This consummation is referred to in the Vedas as liberation from bonds, or bandha vichedana, or release, that is, moksha. To battle against the tendency of body identification, and to win the grace of God as the only means of victory, spiritual exercises have been laid down, such as philosophical inquiry, besides sense control or dhamma, and other disciplines of the sixfold sadhana. The practice of these will ensure the purification of the consciousness. It will then become like a clean mirror that can reflect the object. So the Atma will stand revealed clearly. For jnana siddhi, or the attainment of the highest wisdom, chitta shuddhi, or the cleansing of the consciousness, is the royal path. For the pure in heart, this is easy of achievement. This is the central truth of the Indian search for the ultimate reality. This is the very vital breath of the teaching. The Bharatiya approach is not to waste time in discussions and assertions of faith in dogmas. They do not delight in the sight of empty oyster shells thrown upon the beach. They seek to gain the pearls that lie in the depths of the sea. They would gladly dive into those depths and courageously seek for pearls. The Vedas show them the ideal to follow and the road which leads to the realization. The ideal is the awareness of the supreme truth that lies beyond the knowledge gained by the senses of man. The Vedas remind man that the non-physical Atma is in the physical him. That embodiment of truth is the supreme Atman, the Paramatman. That alone is real and permanent. The rest are all transitory and evanescent. The Vedas took form only to demonstrate and emphasize the existence of God. The Hindu Siddha Purushas, that is, those who attained the highest goal of spiritual sadhana, have all travelled along the Vedic path and carried on their investigations according to Vedic teachings. The Shastras contain authentic versions of their experiences and the bliss that they won. In the Shastras and in the Upanishads they assert, we had the awareness of the Atma. Hindus do not aim at confronting a dogma or a theory and scoring a victory over it. They aim at testing that dogma or theory in actual practice. Their goal is not mere empty faith. It is the sthiti, or the stage reached, the siddhi, or the wisdom won. The life aim of the Bharatiyas is to reach fulfillment through constant sadhana, the fulfillment that comes from the awareness of one's divinity. Mergence with the divine is the attainment of fullness. This is the supreme victory for the Hindu, the Bharatiya. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 2. From Truth to Truth. Questions may be asked and doubts expressed by many about the state of a person after he has attained fulfillment, that is, the fullness of awareness. His life will be saturated with unexcelled ananda, and he will experience oneness of thought, emotion, and knowledge with all. He will be in ecstasy, immersed in the one and only, the eternal divine principle. For that alone can confer joy during the process of living. Genuine joy is this and no other. God is the embodiment of eternal, ever-full joy. Those loyal to Bharatiya culture, whatever the sect or faith which they claim as their special mold, accept this axiom, that God is the highest source of joy. This mata or conclusion they accept as abhimata, that is, dearest and most pleasurable. Fullness means wholeness. Wholeness implies one and not two or three. There cannot then be any place for the individual. When an individualized Atma or Jivi, the particularized, differentiated self, has become full and whole, there is no possibility of his return to the consciousness of the objective world. Some doubts may arise in the minds of many, but this line of thought is not correct. When the individualized jivi becomes fixed in the totality or samasti, that is, the whole, he loses all ideas of distinction and is ever in the consciousness of the totality, the one that subsumes the many. He will then be aware that the reality of each is the reality of all, and that reality is the one indivisible Atma. He will not exhibit any consciousness of distinction between individuals. The divine that he knows as the core of each thing and being is now recognized by him as the divine that he himself is. And so he will be deeper than ever in the fullness of Ananda. How can he then experience separateness? No, he cannot. The rays of that Ananda illumine all regions. The sages and the great rishis became aware of the bliss. They communicated that experience to the world in easily understandable language. The unreachable moon is made known by pointing a finger in the direction where it can be seen. So too, they brought within the purview of men, according to the state of consciousness which each of them had attained, the truth that lies beyond the reach of mind and speech. Their teachings were not only simple, but varied, to educate and elevate all levels of understanding. A small example. One feels happy when one has the knowledge that this one little body is his, does he not? Then, when he knows that two bodies are his, should he not be twice as happy? In the same way, with the knowledge that he has an increasing number of bodies, the experience of happiness goes on increasing. When the whole world is known to be one body, and world consciousness becomes part of the awareness, then the Ananda will be full. To get this multi-consciousness, the limited, egocentric prison walls must be destroyed. When the ego self identifies itself with the Jivi or Atma, death will cease. When the ego self identifies itself and merges with the bliss of the One, sorrow will cease. When it merges with jnana or the higher wisdom, error will cease. Material individualness is born out of delusion. This body which creates that impression is only an ever-evolving atom of a boundless ocean. The second entity in me is the other form, namely the embodied self. When the ego of mine merges with the self in me, then the delusion disappears through the upsurge of its opposite knowledge. When man's thought matures in process of time, undoubtedly all schools of thought have to reach this conclusion. A tree's value is estimated with reference to its fruits. Take idol worship, for example. Moralists, metaphysicians, philosophers, adherents of the path of devotion, and the foremost among the virtuous in all parts of the world, have all agreed that idol worship is highly beneficial. So long as attachment persists to the material body and possessions, worship of a material symbol is necessary. It is but a means. But many decry it as a superstition. This is not correct. It is not the right approach. Such an attitude is just an outburst of foolishness. Is it not a fact that the belief in one's being the body is a superstition? Can the body last forever? Is it not a skin doll with 9 apertures, in which life is so perilously existent that a sneeze may cause collapse? Again, should we not characterize the life people lead, believing in the reality of this world, as another superstition? Is not all the self-importance assumed by people who have positions of power and a great quantity of riches another foolish pose? But Acts done on the basis of faith in the Atma, the reality within, cannot be dubbed as superstitious or foolish. For every opinion one expresses, if proper reasons are given, all will rejoice. But to declare as superstitious all that one does not like is a sign of frenzy, foolishness, or egoism. We will find it impossible to love God or adore Him unless we meditate on some form. This is as essential as breathing for sheer living. That is a necessary stage in the process of living. One has to accept it as such. Childhood is the father of old age. Can old age condemn childhood or teenage as evil? To experience the divine principle, idol worship is and has been a great help to many. How then can the aspirant and the practitioner of spiritual disciplines condemn idol worship after passing through that stage and deriving benefits from it? That would indeed be very wrong and inappropriate. The Bharatiya march towards the supreme reality is not from untruth to truth. It is from truth to truth, from incomplete truth to complete truth, from partial truth to full truth. For what are sadhanas? Every effort made by men, from the remote forest dwellers and the unsophisticated tribals who adore the gross forms of divinity, to those highly evolved seekers who adore the full and the absolute, is a sadhana. Each such effort will take man a step forward in progress. Each individual jiva is comparable to a bird. It can, by longer and higher flights, rise up into the sky. And a stage may finally be gained when it can fly right up to the full splendid orb of the sun. The basic truth of nature is the one in the many. That is the key to its understanding. The Bharatiyas grasped this truth. They held fast to this key. People of other countries were content to lay down certain axioms and enforcing belief in them. They insisted on the acceptance of these axioms and the observance of rules and regulations that arise out of them. They held one single coat before the individuals of the society where they lived and required everyone to wear that same coat. If it does not suit the size of anyone, there was no alternative coat for such people. They had to live without a coat to protect them against the chill wind. The Bharatiya approach was quite different. For each aspect or variation of feeling and thinking, volition and action, they made available a distinct name and form, and provided modes of worship and ways of adoration in accordance with the emotional needs and intellectual caliber of the aspirants and devotees. Of course, a few had no need for such special consideration and treatment, but many took advantage of this concession and advanced in their march towards wisdom and liberation. For one thing, never was it laid down as part of the Bharatiya spiritual endeavor that idol worship is a must, or that it is a stage that has to be gone through. But there is one fact which each one must preserve in his memory. It is this: Bharatiyas may have attachment to their bodies, They may be attached to the upkeep and development of their standards of living, but they would never yearn to cut the throats of others. The Bharatiya, who is fanatic about his religion, would rather immolate himself in flames raised and fed by him, rather than through hatred burn alive those who do not accept and revere his religion. Bharatiya spiritualism negated the destruction of the Atma, the one inextinguishable truth. For the Bharatiya religion fostered the faith that the self in man is no other than the over-self or God. Bharatiya religion directs long journey by men and women through varied paths, confronted and controlled by varied circumstances, but encouraged and enlightened by various types of faith towards the goal of the splendor of God consciousness or the consciousness of the divine. Though the practices and rites might appear on the surface to be crude, they are not opposed to the ultimate truth. The seeming contradictions have to be interpreted as incidental to the need to inspire people with varied intellectual, moral, economic, and social backgrounds. For example, the light that comes through a tiny piece of colored glass is of the same origin as bigger, clearer light. The extent, clarity, brightness, etc. of light depends on the medium only. The source of all light is the one truth, the source of all, the basis of all, the goal of all, the reality in all, and the center in all. As the thread on which pearls are strung as a rosary, God, or the over-self, is interpenetrative in all beings. In all beings. That is the message of Bharat. All beings everywhere, anywhere. Examine carefully all the texts and scriptures that deal with Bharatiya culture and traditions. Find out whether in any of them there is mention that moksha or liberation or the highest realization is available to those who are Bharatiyas only and not to others. Can you produce a single statement on those lines? It can be emphatically asserted that you cannot discover a statement like that. Bharatiya spiritualism has limitless vastness and immensely high ideals. It is a full stream of sanctifying ideations, flowing along with no decline or diminution, straight and smooth to the ocean of divine grace. The journey is direct along a royal road towards the supreme goal. Another point. The source of all spiritual principles recognized and revered by Bharatiyas is God. He is the one supporting pillar. Therefore, no other support is needed for faith. Bharatiya spiritualism is the very foundation of all other faiths. It stands on the very summit. It has achieved victory over many opposing faiths, confronting them with many valid arguments and theories. Bharatiyas have no need to follow any religion or spiritual discipline besides their own. For nowhere else can you secure a discipline or truth that is not existing herein. Other faiths have only adopted some one or other of its beliefs and principles and placed them before people as ideals to be adopted. What has to be borne in mind is this. Bharatiya texts on spiritualism are the most ancient in the whole world. They are the earliest studies and discoveries of the Atma on personal and impersonal God, and on codes of conduct, individual and social, based on those revelations and discoveries. In no other country, among no other peoples, have such ancient teachings seen the light. There may be perhaps some misty ideas or brief glimpses, but they do not deserve the name spiritual text or literature. The Vedic literature pictures not only spiritual enquiries by the sages and sadhaks and their results, but also their lines of thought, their yearnings and aspirations, their secular struggles and temporal problems. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 3. The One Alone. The very first experience in the history of Indian thought is the thrill of wonder. This is expressed in the riks or hymns found in Rig Veda, the earliest revelations of the Bharatiya mind. The riks are all about the gods or the shining ones, that is, the devas. Of these devas there are many: Indra, Varuna, Mitra, Parjanya. These are the names of a few. They appear in these riks one after the other. Of these, Indra with the thunderbolt or Vajra as his weapon is the chief. He is the mighty one who confers rain upon the earth. Indra is called so since he is the master of the Indriyas or the senses of man. That is to say, he is the mind which handles the senses. He is also known as Puruhuta, Puru meaning often, and Huta, invited. The entire name meaning the God who is most called upon. The mind, which is identified with Indriyas since it masters them, is also adored in the Vedas as Rudra. The mind contacts the objective world and experiences it through the instrumentality of the five senses. This aspect of the mind is the Indra aspect. It has also another capability. It can master the senses and become aware of the universal inner truth of the multiplicity called the objective world. This aspect of the mind is designated as Rudra. This is the reason why the Vedas describe Indra and Rudra as the one with two names. About the other gods too it is possible to quote many such descriptions. Yet ultimately, all descriptions lead to the same conclusion. The riks adore deities first as presiding over some function or other. Then these latter get transformed into different names and forms of the one God who has all the worlds in itself, who is the witness, resident in all hearts, and who is the sovereign of all creation. Gradually, all other meanings and reactions are suppressed as not relevant. For example, an element of fear is associated with the deity Varuna. The fear sprouts and spreads in some riks, but soon the wisdom of the Aryas, the noble seekers, subjugates the fear. Many riks are prayers to Varuna from people afraid of being punished by him for their sins. but the idea of a terrorizing God cannot flourish on Indian soil. Nor can many gods of many natures. Bharatiya culture and spiritual outlook upheld the one God, or Ishvara. Next, the Ekeshvara. This axiom, that there can be only one and not many, is current in India since very ancient times. Even in the ancient Vedic and Samhita literature, this faith is already evident as an age-long belief. But the notion of a personal God struck the thinkers and practitioners of this land as rather elementary, a kind of unripe stage in spiritual progress. It did not satisfy their highest aspirations. This attitude found in the revelations of rishis has not been understood or appreciated by scholars and writers of other countries who have studied and commented on the Vedas and affiliated texts. They still dwell on the earlier belief in many gods, or the later belief in one personal God. Ignorance of this kind brings a smile to the lips of the Hindu. Really speaking, even those who learn in their mother's laps to put faith in a God equipped with attributes, known by a name and having a recognizable form, have later to rise to a stage higher than this, and become aware of the One that is spoken of as having many names and many forms. The sadhanas are directed to the realization of this truth. The One, in Him alone is all this flux, all this changing cosmos established. He is the guide and guardian of every consciousness. All such denotions touch only the fringe of the One. Westerners said that the intelligence of man can succeed in this venture. But the seekers of this land showed a heroism that could not be measured or limited. This is a fact that cannot but be accepted. Western philosophers, renowned for their daring flights into the realms of the spirit, have shown only a tiny spark of this heroism. So, they are amazed at the speculative and experiential heights reached by the sages of India. This feeling of wonder has been charmingly expressed by Professor Max Muller. Into whatever unknown realms of experience their causative and positive inquiry led them, the Indian seekers ventured boldly therein. They never hesitated to discard for the sake of success in this adventure whatever they felt as an encumbrance. They were not affected by fear of how others might judge them. Max Muller exhorted people to involve themselves in Bharatiya Paramartha Vahini, that is, the nectarine stream of the search for the Supreme flowing in India. For he felt the Indian sadhakas pursued the path of right, the path of truth. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti. That is, one alone is. The wise speak of it as many. This indeed is most sublimely meaningful. This is the basic truth behind the spiritual efforts of India since ages. And even the theistic principle and practice that will spread all over the world with unprecedented benedictions in the coming years have as their basis this great axiom laid down by the sages of India long, long ago. Writs arose on various deities and divine forces because the rishis knew that the one that alone is can be cognized by each one only from his own viewpoint, and that it is different for different persons, depending on the stage reached in clarifying and purifying the vision. They announced through that statement their discovery that the One is the subject which all the sages and saints, seers and poets, hymnists and composers adored and praised in various languages, during various moods, through various styles of expression. Thus, from the declaration quoted above, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti, emerged consequences of the highest value to the world. For example, many are surprised that India is the one country where religious fanaticism is absent, and no one hinders or harms the religious observances of another. There are in this country theists, atheists, dualists, non-dualists, monotheists and others. They all live together in peace and harmony, without causing or suffering injury. Materialists stood on the steps of temples, held sacred by Brahmins and resorted to by them for worship, and defamed and denied God. They called upon all to follow them. They declared that the idea of God is but an insane fancy. They condemned God, scriptures, codes of morality, righteousness and guiding principles, and said that they were all superstitions designed and developed for selfish aggrandizement by the Brahmins. They roamed across the land and propagated these conclusions. And no one hindered them. Buddhism, which systematically slighted Hindu rites and religious beliefs, was allowed to coexist in an atmosphere of respect. The Jains, too, did not accept the Vedas and the Vedic gods. They asked in derision how such gods can exist and be believed in. Examples of the spirit of tolerance rooted in the revelatory statement quoted above are innumerable. Until the ravaging Muslims sprang on this country, no one in this land of Bharat knew what was meant by violence. It is only when foreign hordes fell upon them and resorted to violence that the people came to know how intolerant man can be. Hindus help Christians to build churches in India. They show readiness to cooperate with Christians. This is evident all over the country. There was no bloodshed at any time in dealing with Christians. The stream of thought directed to the supreme truth would not allow itself to be polluted by violence. To confirm this fact, as well as to understand the validity of this attitude, requires clear thinking and strength of intellect. Buddhists, who were the very first propagators of religion, spread their faith by traveling over the world. That religion entered all countries famed in those days as civilized. The monks who ventured into those lands were tortured. Hundreds were killed by imperial decree. But soon, good fortune smiled on Buddhism. Buddhism taught that violence has to be eschewed. Buddha was accepted as a god, as another name for the One, which has many names according to the Vedic dictum, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti. He was Indra, he was Rudra. That was the unifying effect of the basic revelation of the sages. May this declaration be ever in the memory of man. Bharatiyas, grown up in the culture of India, have deep faith in the equality of all faiths. Whether it is Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, or Christianity, they believe that no one should talk lightly of the worship of God. They believe that when anyone talks lightly on any one of the names of God or any of the forms of God whom others adore, they are insulting the one God. This was the message held forth by the Indian way of spiritual life. Those who have learnt this truth and adhere to it are the real sons and daughters of India. This truth is beyond the grasp of all. Not all can achieve this knowledge. Who is the ruler of the universe? Who is it that stands outside it and guides it? What is the cause of the existence of the cosmos? Whence did this originate? How did it happen? What caused this existence? The Vedas have many riks dealing with these mysteries. Bharatiyas have probed into them. Creation involves the putting together of substances. What is put together must come apart in course of time and get liberated. The individual is created, and so he has to disintegrate and die. Now some are born happy, some are enjoying healthy, happy lives. Some are born miserable, others are born without hands or legs. Some are born feeble-minded or as defectives. Who hurt them or injured them? God is proclaimed as just and kind. It can be argued how such a God can ever be so partial and prejudiced. How can such differential treatment come into the realm ruled by God? Such doubts are natural. But the vision of the sages of Bharat, who moulded the thought of this land, revealed to them that God is not the cause of these differences. They are the consequences of the acts indulged in by the individual in lives previous to the present one. They result in happiness and misery, health and handicaps. Good and bad are self-made, the effects of what was done in previous lives. Can the bodies of men and their conditions, the ups and downs men meet in life, can they not be the accumulated result of hereditary impacts and tendencies? There are two things that stand like parallel lines before us when we consider this subject, mental and material. If satisfactory solutions can be found for the problems relating to human nature and its special qualities in materialism, then there can be no basis for believing that there is a factor called Atma, or the soul. But it is impossible to demonstrate that the capacity to think, for example, has evolved out of physical matter. When an item of work is done again and again, it becomes a habit, a skill, isn't it? Therefore, the skill or habit that a newborn exhibits must be due to constant repetition indulged in long ago. Of course, such practice must have taken place in a previous life or many lives. So, it is necessary to posit the validity of the belief in past and future lives for all living beings. This is a basic belief in Bharatiya spiritual thought. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 4, The Miracle of Miracles. The children of Bharat, or Bharatiyas, believe that they are, each one, the Atma. They are aware that the Atma cannot be cut in twain by the sword, that fire cannot burn it, that water cannot wet it, and that the wind cannot dry it. The Atma has no bounds. Its center is in the body, but its circumference is nowhere. Death means the Atma has shifted from one body to another. This is the belief that every Indian has firmly in mind. The Atma is not subject to material or worldly limitations or laws. By its very nature, it is free. It is unbounded. It is purity. It is holiness. It is fullness. But since it is associated with material, inert bodies, it imagines that it is also a product of material composition. This is the wonder, the mystery, the miracle that it manifests. To unravel this mystery and explain this miracle are beyond the capacity of anyone. How could the full, that is Purna, Atma, get entangled in the delusion that it is not full or apurna, a fraction or incomplete? Some persons might charge the Bharatiyas who declare that the awareness of incompleteness itself can never arise, as persons attempting to wriggle out of an impossible situation. They might say that this is but a stratagem to cover up their ignorance of the truth. How can the pure, the unpartitionable, lose its nature to the slightest extent? The Bharatiyas are simple and sincere, and their nature is seldom artificial. They would never attempt to wriggle out of a situation by resorting to specious arguments. They have the courage to encounter in a manly way any problem before them. Therefore, the answer to the question posed is, the delusion cannot happen. There is no basis for the error of imputing incompleteness for the complete. The full entity called Atma can never imagine itself as wanting or less than full, or feel that it is limited or controlled by the material sheath whose core it is. Every person knows that he feels he is the body. Can anyone announce how this feeling arose and persisted? No one can offer to answer this question. For to say, as some do, that it is the will of God is no answer at all. The plain statement, "I do not know," conveys the same meaning as the statement, "It is the will of God." One is no wiser at the latter statement than after hearing the first. What remains is this: the Atma in the individual, the Jiva Atma, is eternal, immortal, full. There is no death. What appears so is the shifting of its center. Our present condition and circumstances are decided by the deeds done in previous lives. In a similar manner, the conditions in which we have to spend the future are determined by what we are doing now. Between one life and another, one death and the next, the individual either progresses or regresses, expands or shrinks. Like a frail ship caught in a stormy sea, man climbs the froth-rimmed peak of some gigantic wave, and the next moment he is hurled with terrific speed into the deepest trough. The rise and the fall result inevitably from his good deeds and bad. O ye children of immortality, listen! Listen to the answer given in the message of the rishis, who had the vision of the most majestic of persons, the Purushottama, who dwells beyond the realms of delusion and darkness. O ye human beings, brothers, for you to liberate yourselves from the succession of deaths, the only means is knowing Him. Do not imagine that you are sinners, for you are heirs to eternal Ananda. You are images of God, sharers in undiminishable Ananda. You are by nature holy, ever full. You are indeed God moving on earth. Is there a sin greater than calling such as you sinners? You are dishonoring yourselves, defaming yourselves, when you acknowledge the appellation sinners. Arise, cast off the feeling that you are sheep. Do not be deluded into that idea. You are Atmas. You are drops of Amrit, of immortality, that know neither beginning nor end. All things material are your bond-slaves. You are not their bond-slaves. These are the words of the rishis. How can those who have not themselves delved into this truth appreciate this Bharatiya interpretation? Indians are the fortunate ones who have achieved great strength in spirit, holding God as Father, Mother, Guru, Friend, and the Beloved. They have adored God as dearer to them than anything or anyone here or hereafter. How can those who are aware only of mere sensual pleasure know this supreme truth? The craving for sensual pleasure veils the truth from the inner eye. That craving manifests in multiple ways, creating more and more desires and laying down more and more urges to action. These hide the truth like a thick curtain. The recognition of this curtain is a big stage in spiritual progress. This is the Maya principle of Vedanta. From immemorial times, though the truth was self-evident, this curtain has hidden it from man. This has been discovered as the prime obstacle by Indians since ages. How to remove the curtain and cognize the truth? Indians knew that the solution does not lie in the objective external world, and so it would be futile to seek it there. The search in the external world, even for ages, cannot ensure success. For experience alone can guarantee conviction. To gain experience, Indians entered into austerities and disciplined inquiry until they identified the truth and announced it to the world. They discarded the urges of the senses and the manifold attractions of active involvement in the objective world. They taught the world this lesson. The mind of man was the instrument for the Indian seekers to discover the secret, which is the basic principle of wisdom as treasured by them. It became imperative for them to use the mind itself and study its nature and characteristics. They realized soon enough that the study of the external world led them nowhere. They diverted their attention to the internal regions of their consciousness. Thus they laid the foundation for the Vedantic structure. This was the beginning of the Vedantic inquiry. There is no need to seek truth anywhere else. Seek it in man himself. He is the miracle of miracles. Whatever is not in man cannot be anywhere outside him. What is visible outside him is but a rough reflection of what really is in him. The ancient belief was that Ishvara, or God, ruled over the world with himself being outside it. This the Indian seekers put to test through sadhana. and reveal that God was and is in the world and of it. This is the first contribution of Indians to the spiritual world, that God is not external to man, but his very inner core. They declared that it is impossible to remove him from the heart, where he has installed himself. He is the very Atma of our Atma, the soul of our soul. He is the inner reality of each. Those who desire to grasp the supreme vision of Vedantic philosophy have to understand a few fundamental ideas. Philosophy is neither a book nor the work produced by one person. The supremely great Manu has named this Bharat as Brahmavartha, the region of Brahma, the spiritual area where the quest of the one immanent and transcendent principle originated and succeeded. The festive cavalcade of saints engaged in the quest began its march over the continents from this Bharat itself. Like mighty rivers from huge mountain ranges, the stream of spiritual sadhana for the discovery of the higher truth sprang from this land itself. This land has announced to the world its spiritual message with the confidence and courage of thunder blasts emanating from the womb of clouds. When inimical forces blasted into Bharat, this holy land bore the brunt of the blow. It had to present its heroic chest before the attack and absorb the initial impact. Many times this land had to bear these invading thrusts and suffer fierce injuries. But yet, this land has not fully lost its fame and glory and its steadfast strength on this path. From this land, the embodiment of equanimity and compassion, Nanak the Great, preached his highly wonderful message of love. His all-embracing heart blossomed in this land. The Bharatiyas, children of this land, inheritors of this culture, spread their arms to receive in loving embrace not only the Hindu world, but the Islamic world too. Among those who shone as heroic supporters of the Hindu culture unto the last, the foremost was Guru Govind Singh. Undeterred by tortures that forced him to shed his own blood and the blood of his own beloved, deserted by those for whom he had undergone such torture, he did not utter a word of blame against his compatriots, but entered the Deccan and gave up his life as the king of beasts does when his heart is hurt. May that great person's fame persist forever on earth. Such eminent leaders render the whole of mankind indebted to them, for they serve the best interests of all men everywhere. As each individual is a unique entity, so each nation too has a unique individuality. Each person is different from others in certain matters and is endowed with some special characteristics which are his own. So too, each nation has certain special features not found in others. Each individual has to play a role as part of the system. His own previous karma or activity has determined a special line or path for him. The history of nations, too, is the same. Each has to play a role already laid down by its destiny. Each nation has to deliver a special message of its own to the world community. Therefore, it is important that Bharatiyas must recognize, before everything else, the role that this nation has to play, the tune that it must sing, in the world orchestra of peace and bliss. You must have heard, while listening to childhood tales, that there are gemstones in the hoods of some serpents, and that so long as those gems embellish the hoods, it is not possible to kill those serpents. Keep this story in your memory. Then you can understand the most miraculous event in human history, the survival of Bharatiya spiritual culture. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 5. Basic Belief. The Sanatana Dharma had to meet the determined opposition from Islam for centuries. Political subjection to Muslim dynasties added to the problems. The cry, Allahu Akbar, rose to the skies and challenged the very existence of the Bharatiya culture that had been fostered since ages by seers. No other nation suffered so long and so deep from such fear. But the eternally fresh and vital dharma of this land has stood the test, and even today, Sanatana Dharma is as potent and valid as ever. It is ready to meet any challenge from any new quarter. From the signs of the times, it is evident that this culture is today dominant and powerful. Why? It is prepared even to march forward and expand its area of constructive influence. Expansion is the sign of life, isn't it? This day, the principles and practices laid down in Bharatiya culture, and the attitudes and feelings enshrined in it, are not lying low within the boundaries of this subcontinent. Whether we like it or not, they cross over to other lands and establish themselves there. The main ideas, the essential outlooks, penetrate the literatures of those peoples and permeate their thought processes. In some lands, among some peoples, they have won even dominant roles with no opposition. For Bharat is offering as its contribution to the peace and prosperity of the world an invaluable body of spiritual wisdom. This contribution is more elevating than that from any other country. It is more necessary, more basic, and more precious than what any other nation can give. This fact is becoming clear to all mankind. The ancients of this land were not averse to the examination of other problems too. They tried, like other peoples, to unravel the mysteries of external nature. And this amazing nation achieved even in this field results through the exercise of their sharp intellect, which are beyond the fondest dreams of men in other countries. The supreme end of education, the highest purpose of instruction, is to make man aware of the universal, immanent, impersonal. This is the truth that is loudly proclaimed in the Vedas. The seers and sages of Bharat courageously entered upon this adventure. The ever-changing aspects of nature, the appearance and disappearance of its working, may be a fine subject for study. But the ancients of Bharat proclaimed that the science of the transcendent principle that permeates the universe, the unchanging eternal, the embodiment of everlasting, ever-full Ananda, the residence of unaffected, undiminished peace, the ultimate refuge for all time of the individual jivi. That science is the highest knowledge that man must gain. The knowledge of the principles governing objective nature can at best provide man with food and clothing. It teaches man ways and means of gaining them. It leads to the exploitation of the weak by the strong. If the people of Bharat had bent their energies towards the discovery of the secrets of the world, they could have easily acquired mastery. But very soon the people of Bharat recognized that this search was but secondary, and that the prime position should be assigned to the spiritual. They decided that pursuing the secrets of external nature was not the real sign of Bharatiya. This resolution brought glory to this nation. Others cannot even approach the fringe of this problem. Like Prahalada of the legends, Indians have been able to survive ordeals of fire and escape unhurt the torture of ages. Those who had no spiritual outlook or aspiration were not reckoned as Bharatiyas. Many in foreign lands believed that Indians were more politically minded, an inference that was misleading. They felt that only a small fraction of Indians were spiritually oriented. But Bharat always insisted that a spiritually directed way of life was the first and foremost duty of every Indian. Whenever the chance offered itself, after discharging this duty, Indians felt that they should collect and confirm the spiritual potency that they had. This was exactly what happened in the past. National integration meant in those days the concentration and commingling of all the spiritual forces and urges that were scattered among seekers all over the land. The word nation meant in India the grouping together of hearts that beat time to the same song, and that respond by similar vibration to the same spiritual call. The basic truths that this faith expounded were as broad as the sky, as eternal as creation. Those truths were described in many subtle ways, and commented upon very close and deep. But, as a result of the very breadth of the vision that discovered them and laid them down, it was inevitable that many faiths emanated on the basis of the beliefs they encouraged. Diversities in attitudes and practices are natural and ought to be welcomed. There is no need for an iron-clad, hard faith. Only, there is no place for one overall faith. Rivalry among those following different paths cannot bring peace and prosperity to any country. Without the freedom to adopt faith, the world cannot progress. India taught that a small group can never command the inexhaustible resources of the world, that for the effective functioning of the community, it is necessary to divide the work of the community among sections of the people, and allot the task of contributing its share of the common good to each section of community. This gave facilities for diversities and for mutuality. Diversities were approved for the sake of the practical application of spiritual powers and potentialities. So, there is no need for factionalism and fights. The diversities, too, are but superficial. They are not really real. There is an entrancing sense of mystery that can explore these diversities and discover the key to visualize the one that underlies the many. This is what the ancient texts proclaim as the most precious revelation. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti. That is, the one alone exists. Wise men describe it in manifold ways. Therefore it can be asserted that the faith of the Bharatiyas is the one faith that accepts and reveres all faiths, when we shelter factionalism and fanaticism in our hearts, in relation to our own specific faith or the faith of others, we, as descendants of those fathers, are bringing disgrace on ourselves. Whether we are adhering to the classic Vedantic faiths, or whether we are adopting recent trends in that Vedantic thought, we have to bear in mind certain basic, universally accepted truths. All those who bear the name Hindu have to believe in them and shape their lives accordingly. May they have the will to do so. The first of these is, Bharatiyas do not insist that everyone has to be bound to one attitude, or that everyone must abide by one interpretation or commentary only, to the exclusion of other possible explanations or points of view, or that the way of life with all its implications has to be the one approved by some one individual or group. The Bharatiya culture lays down that it is a heinous sin to exercise force upon anyone in matters of the spirit. Number 2. The eternal, universal dharma or religion is taught by the Vedas. The sacred body of teachings, referred to as Vedic, is coeval with creation, without ascertainable beginning or end. With it, all inquiry into the spirit and the ramifications of faith have to find fulfillment and close. One cannot escape this conclusion if he studies and practices the Vedas. For all problems involving differences in spiritual attitudes and aspirations, we can get solutions that are convincing from the Vedic texts themselves. The viewpoints differ about what portions of the Vedas are authoritative for each. Persons affiliated to one sect might regard some portions of the Vedas as holier and more sacrosanct than others. In spite of this, all are brothers and co-sharers of the teachings and the lessons imparted by the Vedas. All that is elevating and beneficial for us today, all that is holy and sacred to us, all that is pure and ennobling, have been made available to us from and through these wondrous texts of old. So long as we hold to this latter belief and proclaim it aloud, what can little differences of opinion over matters of minor importance do to cause rifts? For this reason, we have to announce these lessons and principles so that they spread beyond all horizons. Number 3. The Vedas are concerned with, and they expound, the Supreme Person, the Ishvara who created this universe, who fosters it, in whom it merges in accordance with the process of time, and in whom is again manifest as his form, this amazing universe. We might have diverse beliefs about the nature and characteristics of this Ishvara. One person might picture him as having human nature and characteristics. Another might believe that he is the embodiment of non-human attributes, formless Ishvara. Every one of these can find in the Vedas declarations supporting his viewpoints. It is a fact that, though they hold diverse views, they all have faith in Ishvara, the Godhead. That is to say, they believe that there is undoubtedly one transcendent eternal power, and that all this has originated from it, and that all this has to merge in it again. This belief is the hallmark of a Bharatiya. He who has not acquired this belief is not entitled to the name Bharatiya. He does not deserve to be called a Hindu. Of what nature, with what characteristics is the Ishvara you teach? This question is irrelevant to us. It is not so important. Let us not dispute about the various points of view that divide persons. Enough for us if Ishvara is accepted and emphasized. For even though one description and delineation might be better and clearer than another, no delineation and description can be bad. One declaration would be good, the second one would be better, and the third one best. But in the stream of Bharatiya spiritual adventure, no description or picturization can be pronounced bad and unacceptable. That is the reason why Ishvara confers grace on all those who teach any name and any form that can attract and inspire man as sacred and valid. May this faith grow from more to more, for it brings more spiritual progress the more it is acted upon. Only the aspiration must be related to God or Ishvara. Number 4. For spiritual exploration and discovery, there can be no qualification like wealth or disqualification like poverty. This truth has to be handed down to the children by Bharatiya parents. They have to grow up with this broad feeling. Number 5. Bharatiyas do not accept the belief held by persons belonging to other countries that the universe was manifested a few thousand years ago and that it will be destroyed finally and forever at some future date. Bharatiyas will not accept the theory that the universe arose out of nothing. They believe that the universe, or this objective creation, is beginningless and endless, and that according to the laws of evolution in time, it will recede from the gross into the subtle stage. And after being in that stage for some period, it will again recede into the causal stage from which it emerged. From the one into which it merges, it will gradually manifest itself as many, through the subtle and the gross stages of expression. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 6. Religion is Experience. This wave-like movement of proceeding and receding, of merging and emerging, has been happening since time. It will happen till time ends. It is eternal in its feature. This is the belief of the Bharatiyas. Man is not just this gross body. In it there is a subtle component called mind. Inside it, as its prompter and spring, there is an even more subtle principle called the Jivatma, that is, the individualized soul. This Jivatma has neither beginning nor end. It knows no death, it has no birth. This is the basis of the Bharatiya faith. One other article of faith. This is a unique feature of Bharatiya mental equipment. Until the individualized soul gets liberated from the individualization and merges in the universal, thus attaining moksha or liberation, it has to encase itself in one body after another and go through the process called living. This idea is held by no other people. This is the samsara idea, which the ancient texts or shastras of India reveal and propagate. Samsara means the movement into one form after another. All the different schools and sects among the Bharatiyas accept this fact that the Atmas, apparently individualized, are eternal and incapable of being affected by change. They may differ in describing or denoting the relationship between the Atma and Ishvara or God. One school of thinkers may posit that the two are ever separate. Another may declare that the Jivatma is a spark in the universal flame of fire that Ishvara is. A third may assert that the two are undifferentiated. But the truth remains that the Atma is beginningless and endless. Since it is not born, it has no death. Its individualized image has to evolve through a series of bodies until it attains fulfillment in the human. All schools are one in upholding this faith, in spite of the variety of their other interpretations. We shall now come to the foremost among the glorious truths, the most astounding of the basic truths that the human intellect has attained in the spiritual field. The Atma is, by its very nature, purity, fullness and bliss. That is, Parishuddha, Paripurna and Ananda. This is the belief that animates all schools of thought, whether they are the worshippers of Shakti, or Shiva, or Vishnu, or whether they are Buddhists or Jains. Every Hindu acknowledges it. The Dvaitins, that is, the dualists, believe that the fundamental genuine nature of the Atma is Ananda. This is diminished and desiccated by the consequences of human actions in life after life, and therefore has to be restored and revitalized by the grace of God. The Advaitins, that is, the monists, believe that there can be no diminution or desiccation. They assert that the Atma is fully splendorous. Only through the influence of the deluding effect of ignorance, that is Maya, which superimposes false impression on what is really true, it appears as if it has diminished. Whatever may be the differences in interpretation, when we take our stand on the central core of the truth on which all agree, between the East and the West, there will be discerned a vast, deep passage, where both do journey to the goal. The people of the eastern countries seek in the inner regions of their selves the realization of this glorious, beneficent consummation. While worshipping, we close the eyes and endeavor to visualize God inside ourselves. People of the West lift up their faces and visualize God in outer space, in the beyond. They believe that the scriptures have been recorded by persons under the direction of God. Bharatiyas believe that the Vedas, their sacred scriptures, were the very breath of God, conveying meanings to the sages who had installed Him in their hearts. There is another point which we have to understand. We have to hold fast to it always. Unless a belief is held unshaken throughout night and day, it cannot be used to achieve victory. No success is possible otherwise. When a person asserts that he is low and mean and that he knows but little, he becomes low and mean and his knowledge shrinks. We become what we believe we are. We are the children of Almighty God, endowed with supreme power, glory, and wisdom. We are children of immortality. When we dwell in this thought, how can we ever be low and ignorant? Bharatiya spiritual culture enjoins on everyone to believe that the real nature of man is supreme and that he should ever be conscious of this truth. The Bharatiyas of past ages had faith in their great reality. They achieved victory in their endeavors as a result of this faith and rose to lofty heights. They reached the peak of progress. We have slided down into the present decline mainly because we have lost faith in the Atma in us. This was the beginning of our fall. For lots of confidence in the Atma or self involves lots of faith in God Himself. That omnipresence, that inner motivator of all, who is the warp and woof of our body and mind, our emotions and intellect. Strengthening faith in Him is the only means of realizing the highest goal of man. This is the lesson that Bharatiya spiritual history longs to teach. Children of Bharat, teach your children this life-preserving, glorious and heart-expanding truth from the early days of life. The sanctifying vision that Bharatiya secured is this: the Atma is full and free. It is a wonderful discovery, a thrilling thought. The Atma is by its very nature full. Fullness need not be attained or accomplished and added to it. If fullness is added to it, it can also be subtracted by the passage of time. What is built up must disintegrate. If man is impure by nature, even though he may succeed in achieving purity for 5 minutes, he has to wallow later in impurity, for the purity that comes in the middle will be easily swept away by circumstances. So, all Bharatiya spiritual thinkers declared that purity is our very nature, and that fullness is our genuine reality. They said that we are never really wanting. This was the lesson that Bharatiyas taught the world. This is the stream of spiritual strength that flowed from India and fertilized the world. At the end of life, one should bring to the consciousness the great thoughts one has attained in life, the high feelings one entertained. This was the directive of the sages of India. They did not demand that one should bring to memory the faults and errors that one committed in life. These are inevitable and universal. But the sages declared that one should be aware always of one's reality, and one should be engaged ever in contemplating its grandeur and glory. That, they said, is the greatest step to progress. There is another fact that we have to pay attention to more than all else. For Bharatiyas, religion means experience and nothing less. It is indeed pitiable that we forget this important fact very often. This secret must be imprinted on the heart of every one. Only then can one be safe and secure. Not only this, it is not the way of thought of a Bharatiya to say that all things can be attained by self-exertion. The Bharatiya knows that divine will is the basis of everything. Religious principles have to be practiced and their validity experienced. Listening to their exposition is of no use. Learning one set of arguments and conclusions and repeating them parrot-like are not enough. If they appeal to one's intellect and are approved by it as correct, that will not help at all. It must transform us. The reason why Bharatiyas posit God and declare that God is being and becoming is their experience, which is the highest proof. The declaration does not originate from the head, from the faculty of reason, the yukti or the cleverness. The forefathers asserted that there is the entity, Atma, in each, and that the Atma is but a spark of the universal Atma, for they had become aware of it deeply and without doubt. There were in the past thousands who had sought the experience and won it. Even today, such persons are not absent. In future, too, they will be present. It is a thirst that affects man. Unless he contemplates God and confronts him in bliss, unless he wins the awareness of the Atma that is his reality, man will be tormented by the thirst, the agony that he is lacking completeness. Man must first grasp the truth. All religious factions and fights will vanish as fast as man grasps the reality. For the name, follower of theistic code of morals, can be allotted only to one who has experienced God and realized His glory. Only those who have realized Him in their hearts can have the bonds that chain their hearts to the wheel of birth and death broken. Mere platform orations do not indicate awareness of the truth that has to be attained through religion. Theistic faith is based on genuine experience. Once we accept this, self-examination starts, and one is able to measure how far he has journeyed towards the goal or away from it. He will then realize that he is groping in the dark and dragging others into darkness to grope with him. Only then will men give up factional hatreds in the name of religious war on those professing different faiths. Those who revel in religious wars should be asked, have you seen God? Have you become aware of the divine Atma? Or else, what authority have you to decry or deny this name of God? Are you struggling in the darkness, attempting to draw me too into that darkness? Can a blind man lead another blind man along the road? That is an impossible task. Therefore, understand your truth before you defame or deny mine. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 7, Be Yourself. He who has visualized the Atma principle that animates all can never condemn the religion of anyone. He will never enter any religious squabble or conflict. He will never talk lightly or demeaningly of another's faith. He will never disturb or despise the faith held by another. Only the ignorant with no spiritual experience, only those who do not know the depths of truth, will embark upon the condemnation of the faith of others. It is very unbecoming of man to indulge in or encourage religious conflicts, to ridicule the rites and ceremonies through which others adore God, and to label the religious practices of other people as superstitions. For each one has accepted the practice and holds on to it, since it confers ananda on him. The one is spoken of by those who know as many. The same thing is seen and experienced in different ways by different people according to the angle of vision and the level of intelligence and awareness. Different persons describe the same thing or experience differently. How can anyone declare that they should not do so, or that what they describe is wrong? No one has the right to disparage or deny. Only those who strive to transcend the here and now and become aware of the transcendent principle of Godhead deserve the name Hindu. Those who revel in hurting others do not justify that name. The inner core of Bharatiya culture is this realization of the unity of Atma principle that fills each heart with universal love. Those who are aware of this unity and are well established in it are kith and kin of Bharatiyas, whichever country they may live in, whatever language is native to their tongues. Many human communities have as the basis of their beliefs the theory that man is a bundle of matter, and that this matter is subject to the laws of physics and chemistry. In the languages of the West, death is denoted as the act of giving up life or jiva, whereas in the language of Bharat, it is giving up the body or the deha. This is due to the faith of the Westerner that he is the body, and the faith of the Bharatiya that he is not the body. The Bharatiyas assert and know that they have Atma as their reality, and that the Atma is enclosed in a body. The two views are widely disparate. A civilization that is built on the shifting sand of worldly pleasure can last only for a little while. It will disappear from the surface of the earth. On the other hand, the civilization of Bharat and of the countries that value and follow the civilization of Bharat have survived for centuries and are vital even today. They show new and refreshing signs of more creative life. This fact has to be kept in mind by those Bharatiyas who have dedicated their lives to the imitation of other civilizations and cultures. Imitation cannot build a stable culture. It can never become civilization. It is a sign of cowardice, not a quality that can ensure progress. It is the royal road to downfall. How can man draw inspiration for uplifting himself if he is engaged in hating himself and devaluing his achievements? The Bharatiya should feel no sense of shame when he brings back to memory his forefathers and the elders and teachers of the past who built the culture that nurtured him. Instead, he ought to feel proud of his forefathers and the elders and teachers who shone among them. He must be proud that he has such persons as his ancestors, that his nation is of such holiness, and that his country is one that is endowed with such sacred characteristics. The children of Bharat have to fill themselves with the proud consciousness that in their native land were born wise persons who had attained the heights of self-realization, as well as many others who had risen to peaks of perfection. Manifest the power that lies in self-exertion. Do not resort to the weak stratagem of imitating others. Instead, absorb the good qualities that others may possess. We plant a seed in the soil. Then we supply it with the ingredients it needs: water, air, manure. The seed sprouts, it grows into a sapling, it becomes at last a huge tree. You will notice that it does not become either soil or manure or air or water. These it makes use of, but it sticks to its own nature and grows into a tree. May you too live like that tree. Of course, we have much to learn from others. There is no need to doubt this fact. Those who refuse to learn thus declare themselves fools. Whatever can promote your spiritual advance, you can learn from others. Imbibe them to the full, according to the lines laid down for your own progress in your own moral path or dharma. You must live as you, not as someone else. Do not allow anyone to divert you away from your innate nature. Be immersed in your God, in your own imaginings and feelings, in the bliss that springs from your own heart, and in the delight derived from your sadhana or spiritual practice. When others try to prevent you from doing this, whatever plans they weave and whatever contrivances they employ, resist them at the cost of your own lives. Do not deny yourself that divine awareness and that divine ecstasy. This is the exhortation that echoes through the Paramartha Vahini of the Bharatiyas. Pull down the barriers that stand in the way and obstruct the free flow of the culture of this land that confers such sweetness and strength. Clear the channels through which it flows and cleanse them. Then it can follow its course unimpeded. Sai has willed that this country, Bharat, has to take this sadhana. For too long a time, the theistic dharma of this land has stopped moving. Its characteristic has been for a long time static. Now it has to be made dynamic. It must vitalize the daily life of every human being. It must enter and fructify the palatial Rajbhavan, that is, the royal palace, and the lowly hutment of the poorest in the land. It is the treasure of every one. Everyone has the right to inherit and benefit by it. Having been born as man, one has a valid claim to share it. For this reason, Bharatiyas have to take it before every door and welcome everyone in each home to share it. As the air we breathe is, in God's creation, available to all, the dharma of the awareness of God and His power and mercy has to be available to all. Bharatiyas must hold on to this wide outlook and the universality and unity of this message. The conflicts between disparate faiths and beliefs will disappear of themselves, and peace and love will be restored on earth. Imagine a house full of darkness and centuries. You may enter the house and pray to the darkness to leave the premises. Or you may shower abuse on it for days together. or frighten it by threatening force, the darkness will stay. It cannot be diminished at all. It will not yield to your tactics. It cannot be scared out. But light a lamp, and it will flee that instant. The lamp of wisdom can save man from age-long darkness. This truth has to be well recognized by man, and once recognized, he has to shape his life accordingly. Man has an immensity in him. This is the core of Bharatiya thought. It is really a mystery how man came to regard himself as one condemned to fall. A person might strike us as demonic or as divine. In both, the Atma is the reality to the same extent. You cannot say the Atma in one is less and in the other is more. When faults are found in any one, you will have to conclude that there are deficiencies in behavior. That is all. Do not conclude that there is no divine Atma in him. As a result of the company he keeps, or the inefficiency of the society in which he grew, faults have grown in him. They are not native to his nature, which is Atmic. You will have to provide him good company and beneficial surroundings, and persuade him to enter them. You should on no account condemn him as a born incorrigible and keep him apart. The body is composed of cells which are made up of atoms. The atoms are also physical phenomena. They are fundamentally jada, or composite or unfeeling. The Vedantins speak of a subtle body, separate from this gross body. That too is physical. It is the center of subtle skills and force. It is in this body that all the subtle mental feelings and agitations take place. Every force can work only through some medium or other, which is physical. The same power that operates the gross body works through the subtle processes of thought. They are not two different entities. One is the subtle form of the other. That is all. What is the source of these powers? If we delve deep, we will find that there are two things in nature: Akasha, or sky, and Prana, or life force. Akasha is the source of all the gross and subtle material that one encounters. When Prana, or life force, contacts it, due to the impact, the Akasha principle transforms itself into either gross or subtle in varying proportions. Prana too is omnipresent like Akasha. It can also penetrate everywhere and everything. Like the blocks of ice that water becomes, and that float on water, and that move about on water, the Prana acts on Akasha, and bodies appear. Prana is the force that molds the Akasha into various forms. The gross body is the vehicle of the Prana that it has shaped out of Akasha. The subtle body is of the form of thought, feeling, etc. When the subtle body is transcended, the awareness of the reality becomes manifest. Just as the nails on the fingers persist, however often we pare them as part of our gross body, the subtle body too is an integral part of man's makeup. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 8, Bondage. A person can discard as many gross bodies in which he takes temporary residence as the number of times he pares his nails. But the subtle body cannot be changed. It lasts and persists. This is the most secret doctrine of Bharatiya spiritual thought. Going further along this line of discovery, it can be revealed that man means a complex of the gross body, the subtle body, and the jivi, that is, the individual. The Vedantic philosophy would declare that the jivi shares the quality of eternal, unchanging everlastingness, that is, nitya. Prakriti, or the objective world, is also eternal, but with a difference. It undergoes perpetual change. It is never the same, but it persists forever. The basis for the objective world, namely prana, that is, the life force, and akasha, that is, space or ether, are eternal, but they act and interact without rest and manifest variously and manifoldly. The individual Atma, that is, the Jivatma, did not have its origin in either Akash or Prana. It is not material in nature. So it is eternal, without any change. It did not happen through the impact of prana on akasha or akasha on prana. Things brought together will disintegrate, but things that are themselves, ab initio, cannot so come apart. For disintegration means resuming the original nature, becoming what it originally was, reducing itself to its native substance. The gross body is the result of the combination of prana and akasha, and so it dissolves itself into its components. The subtle body too dissolves, but only after a long, long time. The jivi is not brought together, so it cannot fall apart. It has no birth. It cannot be born. A unitive, partless being can have no moment of origin. The objective world, or Prakriti, consisting of billions and billions of varied things, forces, and events, is governed by the will of God. God is all-knowing, all-penetrating, all-pervading. He is activating Prakriti and acting through Prakriti all the time. Prakriti is ever in his care. His sovereignty is beginningless and endless. This is the doctrine of the dualists, the Dvaitins. This gives room for one question. When the world is ruled by God, how does he permit it to be so wicked and vile? The answer given is that God is not responsible for the grief and the pain. The sins we commit are the progenitors of the grief we suffer. Joy and sorrow are the consequences of the good and the evil that man perpetrates. God is the witness. He does not punish, nor does he cause grief. The jivi is beginningless, that is to say, he has no birth, but he involves himself in incessant activity, and so he has to go through the inevitable consequences of that activity. This is the experience of everyone, the characteristic of everyone's mind. This is the unbreakable law of the objective world or Prakriti. Grief or joy is the image of the activity one engages in. It is the resound, the reflection, the reaction. The jivi can be the witness without concerning himself with the good and the bad of the activity. When involvement happens, good will have to be experienced when good is done, and evil will have to be experienced when evil is done. The Vedanta asserts that the jivi is by its very nature pure and unblemished. This is the accepted doctrine according to Bharatiya thought. But this truth has been befogged by ignorance and neglect. So Maya pollutes the experience, and the shade of ignorance breeds evil. But when satkarma, or beneficial activity, is engaged in, the clouds of Maya are scattered, and the reality of the self is realized. All beings, all jivis, are by their very nature pure. Good acts can remove the taints of evil deeds and preserve its essential purity. Then the jivi is led into the Godward path, the Devayana. The Godward urge will transform the words, the thoughts, and the deeds of the individual. We cannot think without words. Words are the essential material for thought. When the individual drops the body, the words enter the mind enters the prana or life force, and the prana merges in the Atma. The Atma, that is, individualized in the body, when it liberates itself, rushes to the Surya Loka, the region of the solar principle, the Surya. From thence it reaches the region of Brahma, the Brahma Loka. Having reached that region, the individualized Atma or Jivatma has no more concern with Prakriti. It will exist there till the end of time. It will experience boundless delight. It will have all powers except the powers of creation. The authority to rule over the cosmos is exclusive to God. God is free from desires of all varieties. Man's duty is but to offer him love and worship him through love. This raises man to the highest status among beings. Those who are unaware of this status or incapable of discharging its responsibilities belong to other categories. They too offer and worship. They too engage themselves in beneficial activity, but they crave for the fruits they hope to gain. They perform acts motivated by a desire to benefit from the results that emerge therefrom. We have helped the helpless, so our path will be smooth and safe. We have uplifted the downtrodden, so we can avoid troubles on our road. We have busied ourselves in singing the Lord's glory in chorus or bhajan, so we are sure of heaven. These are the calculations of people of this nature who engage themselves in good acts. When such people give up their bodies, that is to say, when such people die, their words will merge in their minds will merge in their prana, and the prana thereafter will merge in the jivi, and the jivatma will travel to the region of the moon principle, the Chandra Loka, that is to say, the Loka of the presiding deity of the mind, suggesting that they have to enter again the realm of the mind with all its agitations and turmoils of wants and wishes. In the Chandraloka, Satjivis will experience some satisfaction and delight until the consequence of the good acts lasts. That is why it is said in the scriptures, Kshine Punye Martyalokam Vishanti. That is, when the acquired merit is spent, they enter again the world of mortal men. The Jivatma encases itself in a body equipped with sense organs, etc., appropriate to the earned consequences of the deeds of the previous body, and starts another life career. The residence of the soul in the Chandraloka is what the Hindus refer to as the time spent as a deva in heaven, or as an angel according to Christian and Islamic religions. The name Devendra, given to the lord of these devas, is an indication of a position of authority. Thousands have risen to that position. According to the Vedas, when the highest good is observed, that person is elevated to the position of Devendrahood. The soul raised previously to that position will descend to the earth and resume its career in human form. Just as on earth monarchs change, in heaven too rulers cannot escape rise and fall. The residents of heaven too are subject to the law of ups and downs. It is only the Brahmaloka that is free from birth and death, rise and fall, ups and downs. This is the basic doctrine of Bharatiya thought, its eternal nectar administered to humanity. When the Jivatma is as a deva in the Chandraloka, it cannot manifest any karma. Only man can express himself through karma which binds him by its consequence. Karma means activity undertaken with desire, with an eye on the result. When the soul is in Chandraloka as a deva, it is content and satisfied, and so it will not crave for activity for earning pleasure or achieving some success. The residence in that loka is the reward it has secured for the good deeds done by it in the past, or it may be the prize won for such goodness. When the delight emanating from the good deeds is experienced and spent away, the balance of the consequence accumulated has to be suffered, and so the soul has to come as man on earth. Then attaining the highest good and engaging himself in acts of highest potency or merit, he can cleanse his heart and reach Brahmaloka, from whence there is no coming back. The word Naraka can nowhere be found in the Vedas. The conception of hell is foreign to the spiritual thought of the Bharatiyas. The idea of hell and the various descriptions of hell are all later additions in the Shastras and Puranas. The authors of these texts believe that religion will be incomplete if it does not posit hell. They lay down diverse tortures as part of hell, but they lay down one limit to the pain that hell inflicts. They declared that there can be no death in hell. The purpose for which hell was created was only to incite fear among the people in order to make them desist from sin. But Advaita does not posit heaven or hell. It is concerned only with bondage and liberation, ignorance and illumination. It is known as Vedanta. There is no faith higher than what Vedanta stands for. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 9. One with the One. The Jagat or cosmos was created by God out of himself, so that he is the originator as well as the material of the cosmos. As a result, he is full, that is, paripurna. The creation is also full, and the individual Atma is also full. Therefore, many full entities are postulated. God made the cosmos manifest from himself. When this declaration is made, the doubt may naturally arise. How could God become these walls or these tables? God is supremely pure. How could he become these impure things? This is another doubt that comes uppermost to some. Let us seek the answers. Man is fundamentally Atma. But he has the encasement of a body, hasn't he? From one point of view, man is not distinct from the body, is he? In spite of this, however, man feels that he is not this body, that his reality is distinct from it, that he is not the baby he was or the old man he is, that he is neither male nor female, and that he persists through babyhood, boyhood, middle age and old age, masculinity and femininity, and all the other stages and changes. So too, the cosmos and all creation are but the billion bodies of God. He is all this, and in all this, but he is changeless and eternal. Nature is amenable to change. The Atma too can contract or expand, blossom or fade, shine or be befogged. Bad deeds will diminish its splendor by clouding its brilliance. Its innate and genuine truth and wisdom may be hidden by evil thoughts and deeds. Those acts and practices that can disclose the native splendor and glory of the Atman are termed good. The Atma is unbound at first, but later it is seen as limited and restricted. Through good deeds and activities, it resumes its vastness and boundlessness. Everyone, without any difference, has the opportunity to achieve this transformation. When the time gets ripe, everyone can succeed in this and liberate himself from the bounds and bonds. But the Jagat, that is the cosmos, will not end. That is eternal, incapable of being destroyed. This is the explanation of the second school of philosophy in India. The first one is the dualist, or the Dvaita. The second one is the Vishishta Advaita, or the special Advaita. This is a higher stage in spiritual inquiry and experience. It posits three entities, God, the Atma, and nature, and speaks of an integration of the three. The dualists posit that the cosmos is a vast machine designed and operated by God. The Vishishta Advaitins declare that it is a phenomenon that is interpenetrated and imbued with the divine. But the Advaitins, or the non-dualists, assert that God is not outside the cosmos, that he became the cosmos, that is, Jagat, and that he is all that is. There is nothing except God, no other, no second. This truth has to be accepted by all. This is the highest truth. To say that God is the Atma and the cosmos is as the body which he operates and lives in is not correct. To assert that the Atma, that is God, is eternal and changeless, But the cosmos, which is his body, can be subject to change and transformation, is also not satisfying. What does it signify when it is said, God is the upadhana karana, the proximate cause of the cosmos? Proximate cause means the cause which produced the effect. The effect is the cause in another form. It cannot be separate from the cause. Every effect that we notice is but the cause that has assumed a new form. The cosmos is the effect. God is the cause. These statements only stress the fact that the cosmos is but God in another form. When it is argued that the body is limited and subtle, and that it leads one to the cause, that is, God, or it was from God that it has evolved and taken shape, the non-dualists would reply that it was God himself who manifested in the form of the cosmos. It may be doubted whether all this multiplicity of things and beings are really God. Yes, it is the truth. All these that the senses cognize, that come into the awareness, are God. There is nothing else but He. Our bodies, minds, intellects, consciousness, all are God. Here another doubt may arise. Why should God be so many individualized beings? Why should He be so many jivatmas? Will God, who is of one form, manifest Himself as so many? How did this happen? If God had transformed Himself into the cosmos, He should have subjected Himself to change. All things in nature that are by their very composition subject to change suffer both birth and death. And if God has come within the precincts of change, does it mean that He too has to die someday? Has He to undergo change and ultimately end? Keep in mind this point also. Then there is another point to be considered. How much of God, what portion of God became the cosmos? The Advaitins say, whatever the portion you may allot or guess about, remember this. The cosmos does not exist. It is an illusion. It never is, has been, or will be. The creation of the cosmos, the dissolution of the cosmos, these billions of individuals emerging and merging, all this is but a dream. There is no individualized jivatma at all, no separated atma. How can there be billions of jivatmas? There is only one indivisible, complete, absolute. Like the one sun reflected as a billion suns in a billion lakes, ponds, and drops of water, the jivatmas are but reflections of the one in the minds that it shines upon. This is what Bharatiya thought emphasizes most clearly through the Advaitin thinkers. Those who cannot grasp this truth are under the influence of Maya or delusion, it can be said. Dreams too have to be based on reality. Without a basic reality, the dependent idea or fact cannot exist. Without a basic thing, subsequent things cannot emanate. Without a basic being, subsequent beings cannot manifest. That base is God or Ishvara. He is full, He is the mind, the body, the Atma. You are only as real as a dream. For the eye that can see reality, the cosmos is not this multiplicity of name and form, but mere Sat Chit Ananda. That is, being, awareness, bliss. Just think of your dream. It does not arise from somewhere outside you, nor do the varied images and activities disappear into some place outside you. They arise in you and disappear into you. While dreaming, you consider the events and persons as real, and you experience, as really as in the waking stage, the feelings of grief, delight, fear, anxiety, and joy. You do not dismiss them at the time as illusory. The cosmos is the dream of God. It arises in Him and merges in Him. It is the product of His mind. These lives and repeated arrivals, all are the fanciful weavings of Maya, unreal fantasies, illusory agitations, unreal appearances. You are the full. You are God. God is you. Those who have experienced this highest wisdom can attain oneness with the One, here and now. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 10, The Yogis. There are 3 steps in the progression of philosophic inquiry, or Vedantic thought, in India. They are the Advaitic, the Vishishta Advaitic, and the Dvaitic. It is not possible to advance beyond these 3 steps by any human endeavor. Advaitic thought is beyond the reach of the common man. It is not so easily comprehensible. To conceive it with the intellect is itself hard. To experience it, a powerful faculty of penetration is needed. Therefore, it is best to start with the dualist or Dvaitic step and experience it as the reality behind things. Then, the second stage of Vishishtadvaita is rendered easier to reach. The individual must progress as fast or as steadily as the community. We pass through boyhood, childhood, adolescence, youth, middle age, and old age. It is an imperceptible but inevitable progress. We experience each only when we are passing through it. So too with these 3 stages of philosophic discovery. Each of these views is latent in the rest, and each proceeds out of the experience of the previous stage. It is not possible to be aware of all 3 at the same time. Based on our sadhana and the experiences gained therefrom, each of these viewpoints comes into the consciousness and forms the spring of action and thought. Those who assert that the universe is real, but declare at the same time that the existence of God is but a dream, are only proving themselves foolish. For when the effect, namely the cosmos, is real, it must have a cause. For how can there be an effect with no cause? God can be denied only when the universe is denied. God can disappear only when the cosmos disappears. What now appears as the cosmos is really God. This is the vision that the true sadhaka will get when he succeeds in his endeavor. As a matter of fact, the universe we experience is the dream. When we awake from the dream, the truth of its being God will shine in the consciousness. From the beginning of time, the God whom we posit outside ourselves has been the reality inside us also. This truth too will become steady in the faith of man. Of course, there is no philosophy existent that can be satisfying to all types and levels of mental equipment. Each has a distinct value. The stages of intellectual development, or the powers of reasoning, are different from each other. So the three schools of philosophical interpretation mentioned above, that is, the Dvaitic, the Vishishtadvaitic, and the Advaitic, attain acceptance among different temperaments and different groups of people. Therefore, no one school has the right to claim superiority and impute inferiority. Only those who are unwise will resort to such tactics. When people approach us with fanatic views, we must meet them with a smile, eager and yearning, filled with devotion to God. One can get intoxicated, of course, but only as a result of quaffing the wine of prema, or love. When someone who is frantic for work approaches us, we must share with him our skill and strength and join with him in work. By this means, it is possible to bring harmony between followers of various faiths and philosophic thoughts. It will bring together schools of thought and belief. If only this principle of harmony and harmonious cooperation had become a permanent asset of each man, how excellent it would be! How happy the world would have been if everyone had this knowledge that his viewpoint can at best be only partial, and that it requires the harmonious commingling of many other facets to posit truth. Yoga means coming together. In India, where yoga is flowing in the veins of everyone since ages, it is possible to have the harmonious coexistence of many faiths and beliefs, which is the ideal type of universal religion. Those who can heroically put their faith into daily living can accomplish this togetherness in the human community. Togetherness or union can be established between one's outer behavior and inner nature. The sadhaka, that is, the aspirant for spiritual progress, intent on the path of prema, can strive for union between himself and the embodiment of prema, namely God. The Vedantin can achieve the union of all that is in the one concept of God. The path of yoga is designated differently in Sanskrit under different contexts, but those who are able to conceive and execute the union are revered as yogis. Those who strive through activities and achievements to establish the union are the karma yogis. Those who follow the prema path are the bhakti yogis. Those who strive to manifest their latent powers and canalize them are the raja yogis. Those who stick to logical analysis and rational interpretations and attain intuitive perception are the jnana yogis. In the Bharatiya spiritual history, these four types recur again and again. First, the karma yogi. He adopts the path of establishing union with Godhead by elevating and sublimating acts. We meet in the world many who seem to have been born just to accomplish one particular mission or project. Their intellect is not satisfied with mere imagination or planning. Their minds will be full of actual concrete achievements which they yearn to realize. For such people, a guidebook or shastra is needed to direct them along beneficial paths. Everyone in the world is seen engaged in some activity or other all the time, yet very few know the significance and worthwhileness of karma, or how best to realize the best results out of this inescapable trait. Hence, life is being made banal and barren. Karma Yoga teaches man the awareness of this significance and guides him along to achieve the maximum benefit out of the activity. Where, when, and how karma has to be done, how spiritual urges can reinforce strength of mind in the performance of karma, and how karma is to be taken up so that spiritual development can result, these are taught us by the Karma Yoga. There is one great objection raised by some people about this, and we have to pay some attention to it. The objection is that Karma Yoga involves too much physical strain. But basically, it is the company that one keeps that decides the strain and the stress that the mind and the body of man are subjected to. I like very much to engage myself in only this task. I sought only to do good to him, but he ignored my desire and tried to injure me. These are the usual causes for the strain and stress mentioned above. Such disappointment makes one lose interest in activity. It wants to do good, and it seeks to do good to someone in some way, hoping to derive joy therefrom and distribute joy. When such joy does not arise, despair sets in. But without getting attached, without being aware as to whom the karma helps or how, the lesson that Karma Yoga teaches is, do the karma as karma for the sake of the karma. Why does the Karma Yogi fill his hands with work? That is his real nature. He feels that he is happy while doing work. That is all. He does not bargain for results. He is not urged by any calculation. He gives, but never receives. He knows no grief, no disappointment, for he has not hoped for any benefit. The second path, Bhakti Yoga. This is congenial for those who are emotionally oriented. It is the path for those capable of filling their hearts with love. The urge is to have God as the beloved. His activities will be different, for they relate to incense burning, gathering flowers for worship, building shrines and temples where he could install and adore symbols of beauty, wisdom and power. Are you inclined to remark that this is not the right means of achieving union with divinity? Remember that saints and sages, great spiritual leaders and guides throughout the world have emerged just from this devotional and dedicatory stage of spiritual endeavor. Some faiths try to imagine God as formless, and described worship of God through various such acts as blasphemy. Tried to suppress the bhakti cults, and in the process they slighted the reality and its power and majesty. The belief that God cannot be symbolized in a form is evidence of blindness. The charge that such worship is barren is a hollow charge. The history of the world is the witness to the efficacy of bhakti. It is not proper to ridicule these activities, ceremonials and rituals, and the descriptions of the lives of sadhakas who adhere to them in order to earn union with divinity. Let those who yearn after the joy of worshipping the form do so. Certainly, it will be a sin to shatter their faith and treat it as infructuous. The glory of the great heroes of the spirit, those who have scaled the highest peaks of realization, and those who attain spiritual fulfillment, is exercising immense influence on the mind of mankind. It is as a result of a long line of such seers that the spiritual message of India has attracted the attention of all nations. If India has been able to earn the reverence of the world, the reason has to be sought in the precious treasure that they have earned and preserved. Here, Love of God and fear of sin have been the chief pillars of life and the everlasting guides for living. Bharat has won a name for being a holy land, a land steeped in renunciation and in spiritual sadhanas aimed at union with the Absolute, renowned for tyaga, that is, renunciation, detachment, and yoga. The urges that this culture encouraged were all directed to the conquest of the vagaries of the mind. Can the explanations offered by this culture on the nature and characteristics of reality be palatable to those afflicted by agitated feelings and passions? To the great builders of this culture, God was tangible truth, the one and only real fact, the goal of their entire love. So, the inheritors and followers of this culture treat the nihilist arguments based on the inescapably limited reason as the fool is treated in the story. The fool saw an idol, and eager to discover the god, he broke it to pieces with a hammer. The Bhakti Yoga will teach such people the path of love. It will tell them not to love with a view to gain profit. Love all. Love all as you love yourselves. No harm can come to you then. It will only spread joy and happiness to all. God is present in all beings as love. So the love is directed to and accepted by, not the individual, but by God who is resident there. The seeker of God who relies on the path of devotion and dedication soon becomes aware of this fact. Some love God as the mother, some others as the father, and some love God as dearest and closest friend. There are others who regard God as the beloved, the only desired goal. They all endeavor to merge their love with the ocean of love that God is. Wherever love is evident, take it that it is God's own love. God is the greatest lover of mankind. Therefore, when anyone decides to serve man whom he loves, God showers grace in plenty. When the human heart melts at the suffering of others and expands as a result of that sympathy, believe that God is present there. That is the sign of the validity of the path of devotion, the Bhakti Yoga. Now about Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga means the process of establishing mastery over the mind. One need not surrender one's intellect or follow the guidelines of religious leaders. There is no chance of being misled or mistaken. At every step, one has to rely on one's own intellect and experience as tested by oneself. Every being has three varieties of instruments for acquiring knowledge, and through that knowledge, wisdom. The first is instinctive. This is very strong, active, and advanced in animals. This is the earliest, the lowest, and therefore the least beneficial of the three. The second is the rational, the instrument that seeks the cause and the effect thereof. This is most evident in man. The instinct can operate only in the limited field of senses and sensory experiences. In man, the instinctive knowledge is largely subordinated by the rational instruments. The limits of the instinctive are very thin. Reason can range over vastly wider fields. In spite of this, reason too is capable of very poor performance only. its reach is restricted. It can proceed only a certain distance. It cannot venture further. The road that logic takes is not straight. It is more circular, returning again and again to the place where it started from. Take, for example, our knowledge of the objective world, of the elements and energies that compose it. That which urges and prompts the objective world and its components does not stop with just this much. It absorbs also that which is immanent outside the objective world. And so, the extent that reason can spread over and explain is as the consciousness that is imprisoned in the tiny molecule as compared with the vastness and grandeur of the transcendent fullness. For us to go across the boundaries of reason into this full, free realm of intuition, certain spiritual exercises and disciplines are essential. They can be grouped under the name God-propelled jnana. That is, the highest wisdom. For we have only 3 stages of jnana. Sahaja jnana, that is, native, derived from the senses of action and perception. Yukti-yukta jnana, knowledge derived by the process of discrimination and evaluation. And Ishvara prerita jnana, that is, God-induced knowledge gained through grace by inner vision or intuition. The first of these is the knowledge possessed by animals, the second is the characteristic of man, and the third is the special treasure of high-souled individuals. It is possible for everyone to foster, cultivate, and develop the seedlings of this third jnana, for the capacity is latent in all. Another fact also has to be borne in mind. The 3 are stages of growth, and so not 3 mutually exclusive types of knowledge. The Ishvara prerita jnana will not contradict the Yukti-yukta jnana. It will only bring to light what is unmanifest in the Yukti-yukta jnana. The later stage only confirms and elaborates the previous ones. Afflicted by the vagaries of the mind and its fancies, some take their distorted attitudes as God-given or grace-induced. And they may even call upon others to heed their counsel. They lead men astray by their barren guidance. These morons announce that their absurd prattle is God-propelled. True teaching can never be counter to the Yukti-yukta jnana, the conclusion arrived at by discrimination and evaluation. The yogas mentioned above are all established in consonance with this view. Raja Yoga has to be practiced mostly by the mind and its resolution. This is a vast subject, and so we shall consider here only its central theme. It is something that is the only refuge for the lowest of the low and the highest of the yogis, namely, single-pointed meditation. For the person engaged in research in a laboratory, for one walking along a road, or for a scholar reading a book, or an individual writing a letter, or driving a car, the concentration of all their attention on the articles before them and the activity they are engaged in is very important. He understands the nature and peculiarities of the object he is handling. The more intense your concentration, the more successful will be your activity. When the mental abilities are focused on one effort, knowledge can be acquired quicker and from a wider field, and that is the only way by which knowledge can be earned. Concentration will enable one, whoever he is, whatever the activity he is engaged in, to finish it much better than otherwise. Whether in material assignments, or in ordinary day-to-day work, or in spiritual sadhana, concentration of mental energies is a must if success is to be achieved. It is the key that can open the treasure chest of jnana. This is the most important aspect of Raja Yoga. It can even be said that it is the only important aspect of that yoga. Millions of unwelcome, unwanted, unnecessary, and even harmful thoughts enter our minds and confound their activities. These have to be kept out. The mind has to be guarded and controlled and kept under our rigorous supervision. Raja Yoga is the one refuge for persons endeavoring to win this victory. Jnana Yoga is mostly devoted to the study of principles, basic principles. This universe or cosmos that we cognize as outside ourselves can be explained by means of various theories of knowledge. But no one of them can be convincing to the uninitiated. The Jnana Yogi weaves many such theories and hypotheses. He is not convinced of the reality of any material object in the universe, or of any activity, or even of anyone else who propounds any other explanation. He believes that he should transcend the daily chores of life and not be bound by social or other obligations. In the vast ocean of isness, or sat, that is, truth, reality, all objects are but drops in his view. They are all struggling to move from the circumference to the center, from which they manifested through Maya. The Jnana Yogi too yearns to merge in the center, the core of reality, away from the tangle of apparent diversity. He exerts himself to become the truth, not only to become aware of it. Of course, as soon as he is aware of it, he becomes it. He cannot tolerate the thought that he and truth are separate and distinct. The divine is his only kith and kin. He knows none other. He does not entertain any other urge, any other attachment, any other desire. God is all in all. He cannot be affected by grief or joy, failure or success. He sees and experiences only one unbroken, unchallenged stream of bliss consciousness. For the person who is firmly established in this state, the world and its ups and downs appear trivial and illusory. In order to stay in that consciousness, he has to counter the pulls of the senses and face the fascinations of the world without any agitation of mind. The Jnana Yogi is vigilant against the temptations held before him by his senses, and turning them aside, he approaches the divine and seeks strength and solace there. He realizes that the power and energy that vitalize the tiniest of the tiny and the vastest of the vast is the same divine principle. His actions, thoughts, and words reveal this vision he has experienced. This is the Paramartha Drishti, the supra-vision. It sees all elements, the earth, fire, water, wind, and sky, as the divine itself, and all beings, man, beast, bird, and worm, as emanations from God, and therefore fully divine. One fact has to be noted here. If a person has this knowledge of the immanence of the divine, and even of its transcendence, he cannot be honored as a jnani, or a wise, liberated person. For the knowledge has to be digested through actual experience. This is the crucial test. It is not enough if the intellect nods approval and is able to prove that Godhead is all. The belief must penetrate and prompt every moment of living and every act of the believer. Jnana should not be merely a bundle of thoughts or a packet of neatly constructed principles. The faith must enliven and enthuse every thought, word and deed. The self must be soaked in the nectar of the jnana. The intellect is a poor instrument, for what the intellect approves as correct today is tomorrow rejected by the same intellect on second thoughts. Intellect cannot judge things finally and for all time. Therefore, seek for the experience. Once that is won, the Atman can be understood as all this. That is the Jnana Yoga. According to the Bharatiya way of thought, the Vedas are taken as the voice of God. Thus the Vedas are the primary source of all knowledge for Bharatiyas. Everything is tested on the basis of Vedas. The ancient sages have laid down that what agrees with the Vedas is agreeable to man. What does not thus agree cannot agree with him. The Vedas were not spoken by humans or composed by men and women. They were heard and recorded by sages and transmitted by the Guru to the pupil for generations by word of mouth. The Guru recited, the pupil listened and recited just as the Guru did, with the same care and correctitude. Thus the Vedas have been handed down from centuries. No one can determine the exact dates when the Vedas were first heard or recited, therefore they are taken as Sanatana, or eternal. At this point we have to keep in mind another very important truth. All other religions prevalent in the world hold as authoritative communications made to some holy persons by God himself in his corporate form, or through some superhuman personalities or embodiments of parts or portions of divinity. Bharatiyas do not follow this line. They declare that the Vedas are based on no human authority. They do not depend on any man for their validity. They are emanations direct from God. They are primeval. They are their own authority and validity. They were not written down or composed, constructed or put together. The cosmos or creation is limitless, eternal, and it has neither beginning nor end. So too the voice of God, namely the Vedas, have no limit. They are eternal. They have no beginning nor end. Vid, the root from which the word Veda is derived, means to know. When knowledge began, the Vedas too manifested. The rishis visualized and announced them. They are the seers of mantras, the mantra drishtas. The Vedas have two major sections, the Karma Khanda and the Jnana Khanda. First comes the Karma Khanda, and it is followed by the Jnana Khanda. In the Karma Khanda, a number of different kratus or sacrifices, in which oblations are offered in the sanctified fire, are mentioned. Most of them have been given up by Bharatiyas in recent times, since it has become difficult to perform them with the exactitude the Vedic rules prescribe. Some still continue in a very attenuated form. In the Karma Kanda, the moral codes are insisted upon very much. The moral rules and restrictions regulating life and conduct refer to the brahmachari or the student stage, the grihastha or the householder stage, the vanaprastha or recluse stage, and the sannyasa or monastic stage. Also, the Karmakanda declares what is right and wrong for people following various professions and occupying different statuses. These are being followed here and there in some thin form by people in India. The Jnanakanda is called Vedanta, or the end of the Vedas, the goal, the finale. The Jnanakanda is enshrined in the Upanishads. The adherents of the Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, and Advaitic schools of philosophical thought, the worshippers of Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, Surya, and Ganapati, all accept the supreme authority of the Vedas. They may interpret the Upanishads and other texts according to their own predilections and intellectual caliber, but no one dare question the authority of the Veda or the Vedanta. So, it is possible to use the words Hindu, Bharatiya, or Vedantin to the same person. The various schools of philosophical thought current at the present time may appear difficult to comprehend, or as derived from unripe understanding. But when the matter is thought over in quiet, or the texts are studied in silence, or investigated without prejudice, it will become clear that they have all relied on the points raised and the conclusions arrived at in the Upanishads. The Upanishads are being symbolized and worshipped in image form in temples and in private shrines as a tribute to this universal appeal. They have entwined themselves inseparably in our lives. The Vedas are endless, ananto vai Vedah. But they were reduced into 4 collations, and their essence was preserved in those forms. For promoting peace and prosperity in the world, the 4 were then taught and propagated. They are the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharvana Vedas. They uphold dharma, or righteousness, proclaim the reality, and promote peace and harmony by developing among men the attitudes of worship, music, and adoration, and also by the cultivation of skill in weaponry and war. They present the ideal before mankind and exhort them to follow. Whether the Bharatiya is aware of it or not, invariably, every right act of his will have some Vedic injunction or prohibition behind it as the regulator or the illuminator. From marriage rites until funeral rites, and even the rites for the propitiation of the manes or ancestors, the Vedas are the guides. A true Bharatiya should never forget the Vedas or be ungrateful to them. The dualists, the special monists, the monists, all direct their lives according to lines laid down in the past by the sages. But they do not now know the origin and the purpose of these guidelines. If only they do, the fruit will be much more plentiful and permanent. Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 11. Values in Vedas. Vetti iti Veda. Knowing, knowledge is Veda. That is to say, man can know from the Vedas the code of right activity and the body of right knowledge. The Vedas teach man his duties from birth to death. They describe his rights and duties, obligations and responsibilities in all stages of life, as a student, householder, recluse, and monk. In order to make plain the Vedic dicta and axioms, and enable all to understand the meaning and purpose of the do's and don'ts. The Vedangas, Puranas, and epic texts appeared in course of time. Therefore, if man is eager to grasp his own significance and true reality, he has to understand the importance of these later explanatory compositions also. This is the reason why the ancients taught the Vedangas and other related texts even before the pupils learnt the Vedas. This was a must in the Gurukulas or hermitage schools of the past. In those days, the Bharatiyas studied the 14 Vidyas or subjects. The Vedas were learnt by rote. The master of the Vedas, who had learnt the Vedas in this manner, was called Jada or inert. But the word did not convey the meaning that he had not known anything. It only meant that he had nothing more to learn and was therefore inactive and content. Through the study of the Vedas, he had become the master of all knowledge. In order to make this human career worthwhile, the study of the Vedas was considered very essential. The stream of Indian culture always emphasized the authority of the Vedas as the supreme authority for deciding the values of human living. Of the Vedas, the first is the Rig Veda. It is generally considered as composed of 10 mandalas or sections. In the first 9 sections, hymns in praise of God under the names of Agni, Indra, Marut, Ushas, etc. are found. Historians and researchers have suggested certain theories to explain how these hymns of praise arose. Men in those days realized that Agni or fire, Vayu or air, Maruth or wind, etc. were far more powerful than them, and so they described their divine qualities and propitiated them. The second of the Vedas is the Yajur Veda. This Veda has 2 recensions, the Krishna Yajur Veda and the Shukla Yajur Veda. This Veda refers to the Ganga river and its region. It is the source of the Uttara Mimamsa school of thought and interpretation. The people had by then demarcated the forest areas from the cultivable areas around the villages and had taken to habitation in the villages. There is a prominent reason that prompted the separation of certain portions of the Veda into the Yajur Veda. The Yajur Veda has 7 sections called Aranyakas or forest texts, indicating by that very name that it refers more to disciplines and spiritual exercises which can be practiced only in the seclusion and silence of the forest. The third Veda is the Sama Veda. In this collection, many of the hymns or riks of the Rig Veda are repeated, but with additional musical notes, so that they may be sung during Vedic rituals and ceremonies. So the Sama Veda is mainly svara or musical notation. The Rig Veda Aryans lived on the banks of the Sindhu river, while the Yajur Veda came to their awareness when they were on the banks of the Ganga. The Sama Veda songs are also visualizations of the same era, but the people seem to have occupied even the middle region of Bharat. The Sama Veda is referred to as the Gana Veda also, in order to highlight its musical nature. All musical schools are derivatives from the styles that are marked out by the Sama Veda. All tones and notes are embedded in that Veda. The fourth is the Atharvana or Atharva Veda. Many have described it in many diverse ways. Some have even denied it the status of a Veda. Others say that it is made up of what remained after the collation of the rest. In the other Vedas, the might and mystery of the gods are described, but in this Veda, the possibility of man acquiring certain powers and mysteries by his own effort and exercises are mentioned. This is its speciality. Hatha Yoga, Tiraskarani Vidya, Ashta Yoga, these are made available for man only in this Veda. Of course, by winning the grace of God, man can acquire even skills that are otherwise impossible of attainment. In short, it must be realized that the Vedas are very important for man, and that they cover the entire range of knowledge. They are the source and spring of Bharatiya culture. They are the recordings of visions and divine experiences. Their source is not some one definite person. They were revealed by God Himself, of His own innate mercy. The Vedic inheritance has been preserved pure and unsullied even to this day because it was handed down from the master to the disciple in regular succession. Since it is timeless and authorless, it is worthy of acceptance by all. No one can afford to neglect or deny their value. Whatever may be the diversities in content, the commentators agree that the essential teaching of all the four Vedas is the same. The sections dealing with rites, modes of worship, and the conclusions of inquiry help man to achieve the four goals of life, namely, dharma, artha or wealth, kama or desire for things of the sensory world, and moksha. Since it is very hard to master the Vedas, we have developed a vast Smriti literature to expound the Shruti texts, the Puranas and the Itihasas. Far-sighted seers compose these out of historical and legendary incidents and events. Karma and Jnana are related as cause and effect, and so the Karma sections of the Shruti and Smriti, which emphasized activity, led to the discovery of new facets of truth, and rendered the ideas of a transcendent God clearer and nearer. So too, the discovery of clearer concepts of God through spiritual inquiry along the Jnana Marg, or path, fed activity with better meaning and higher purpose. The benefit of karma was proportionate to the faith, and the faith in karma was in proportion to the awareness of God won through jnana. For involving oneself in good activities, jnana is an essential prerequisite. That jnana has ultimately to be derived from the Vedas. It is based on the teachings of the Vedas. Karma is, really speaking, the practice of dharma. The Upanishads give us guidance on what has to be done and what has to be avoided in the spiritual journey. They direct us to revere the mother as God, revere the father as God, revere the preceptor as God, revere the guest as God, and also warn us that truth shall not be neglected, dharma shall not be neglected. So, there are both positive and negative instructions. Follow these counsels, not others. Whatever conduces to your progress in goodness, accept. Avoid other counsels. Thus do the Upanishads instruct. In those centuries, the king himself studied in hermitages at the feet of the Upanishadic sages, and helped others to study by granting economic aid profusely to the centers of learning, which shone as repositories of Vedic lore. as the king, so the subjects. Fostering the Vedas meant fostering the Vedic scholars and practitioners, the Veda Vithis. At the present time, encouragement is afforded and scholarship is honored in other branches of learning. The Vedic scholars are not given similar encouragement and emoluments. But this is an important aspect that has to be attended to. Dharmo rakshati rakshitha. Dharma protects those who protect it, says the Shruti. If people come forward to foster the sources of dharma, that good act by itself will help foster those who do it. The study of the Vedas has become today the task of the economically weak. People have reconciled themselves to this situation. They associate the study with such a sad and pitiable picture. Vedic studies have come down to this deplorable pass. The very pundits who have attained scholarship in the Vedas are using it as a commercial item that can be sold. They do not demonstrate the value of Vedic study in the peace and harmony of their lives, and thus win reverence for the Vedas by Sathya Sai Vahini, Chapter 12, Values in Later Texts. Soon after the propagation of Vedanta, through the Upanishads and other texts, the Rishis, steeped in tapas, or austerities, and the spiritual experience they gained therefrom, composed the Smritis, expatiating upon the codes of conduct for the people during the various stages of life, as well as when they occupied various statuses in society. The Smritis, however, did not acquire the authority that the Vedantic texts had, for they dealt with rights and responsibilities, duties and obligations. Such smritis can be found in sacred scriptures being adored by followers of other religions. They consider such social codes and individual guidelines given by their prophets and seers as valuable and binding. We too revere them, and should continue to revere them as regulations set up for the good of society and the progress of man. For we must admit that they were framed by Mahapurushas, outstanding sages and well-wishers of the people. But in process of time the Smritis suffered change by omissions and additions and by differences in emphasis. The sages allotted for each era or yuga a particular smriti as authoritative, for too many smritis with divergent counsel caused confusion and doubt. They said, those in the Krita Yuga have to consider one smriti as specially laid down for them, that those in the Treta Yuga have to follow the dictates of another, that in the Dwapara Yuga people have to observe the path prescribed in a third, and that the Kali Age people have to resort to a fourth. When centuries roll over the land one after another, new problems arise, new situations and predicaments confront man, and so the laws and limits of the past have to be altered here and there. The people have to be shown the path to spiritual progress under the altered circumstances, and so the smriti that suits the new era is declared as binding. Nevertheless, this has to be borne in mind and carefully noted in memory by the readers. The Atma Dharma, enunciated in the Vedanta, is eternal, unchangeable. It can never be watered down or adjusted to the needs of the times. Faith in the Atma as the core, the reality, the goal, is the lasting teaching. It is true for all time. The truths of Atma Dharma are based on the eternal foundations of the core of Purusha and Prakriti, of man and nature, which is the projection of the divine will. So they are beyond the reach of change. They are as relevant and as valid today as they were thousands of years ago. Even when 1,000 more years roll by, their relevance and validity cannot be affected in the least. Vedanta will stand firm, irrespective of the past becoming the present and the present flowing on into the future. The moral codes and ideals of good conduct, the sadhanas that man can adopt to control his mind and senses and purify his intelligence, have, however, to suit the conditions of the people, the bonds that they cultivate among themselves and other groups. With the changing face of social conditions, they too have to undergo adjustments and modifications. They could well be appropriate and beneficial under certain circumstances of time and space, but might not be so under other circumstances. For example, the food regulations that are prescribed during certain periods are withdrawn, and new rules laid down during certain other periods. Climatic conditions dictate the type of food needed. Smritis recognize the need and allow changes in food habits in order to maintain health. The same attitude is seen in other matters also. For the same reasons, under modern conditions, it is desirable to have changes in the regulations and limits that govern society. Of course, the fundamental principles of dharma must remain unaffected. They can never be shaken or loosened. Now about the Puranas. Puranam Pranjalikshanam. That is to say, the Puranas deal with historical incidents of creation and evolution. The incidents are so chosen and narrated that they provide illustrations of basic philosophic truths. The Puranas were composed to expound the teachings of the Veda and Vedanta to the common man through interesting mythological and legendary tales. The language of the Vedas is very ancient, and it contains many archaic elements of grammar and vocabulary. Even great scholars find it difficult to discover the age when the riks were formulated. But the Puranas were composed in the language that was current and that was easily understood at the time. What we now know as the Sanskrit language is the language of the Puranas. Not only scholars but even ordinary folk could easily follow that language when the Puranas were written. The Puranas have historical narratives of divine personages, great rulers and dynasties, and the fortunes of kingdoms and communities. Through them all can be seen shining examples of dharma and expositions of spiritual principles. All the texts, scriptures, and holy books referred to are grouped under the one comprehensive name, Hindu Shastras. It is no wonder that the people who revered and composed during thousands of years such a vast and valuable literature of religion and philosophy were in course of time divided and subdivided into sects and subsects, owing preferential loyalty to special creeds and beliefs. Some of these had broad gaps between them. We have no time now to elaborate on the fact that the differences between the sects are based on attitudes born out of the freedom of thought that was authoritatively allowed by the ancients. Nor is it necessary. What we have to grasp are the truth accepted by all and the attitudes approved by all, that is to say, the principles which a person calling himself Hindu has to believe. What exactly is the cause of creation? What is the nature of the original substance which creation affected, and how? These are questions important not only for Bharatiyas, but for all men prone to inquiry. There can be no effect without a cause. There can be no structure without a base. Well, it can be asserted that all this visible cosmos has Brahman as the root cause. But what is Brahman? Brahman is eternal, pure, ever-vigilant, omniscient, indivisible, formless. Brahman is the origin of this cosmos or Jagat. Brahman is shaping, evolving and fostering this Jagat. Now a few doubts might arise in people's minds. How is it that there is so much partiality evident in creation? Some are born healthy, and some others unhealthy. Some lead prosperous, carefree lives, while others toil throughout their lives in dire poverty. Certainly, it can be argued, there are signs enough of the partiality that the creation or Creator reveals. It has to be made clear that life thrives on death. Life is based on death. One living thing consumes another, in order that it may live. The strong trample on the weak. This tale of terror continues unceasingly. That is the very nature of this world. Seeing this, people conclude that if the world was created by God, He should be cruelty itself. Such inference appears justified from the ordinary man's point of view. But the Bharatiya Paramartha Vahini, the pure stream of Bharatiya spiritual culture, declares that this is not true at all. God is not the cause of either misery or joy, of good fortune or bad, it announces. Then who brings about the evil and the good? We ourselves, is the answer. Rain falls equally on ploughed land as well as unploughed. Only the ploughed land derives benefit therefrom. The clouds are not to blame. The fault lies in the ignorant idler who lets his land lie fallow. The grace of God is ever at hand. It has no more or less, no ups or downs. We draw upon it more or less, or let it go by, or use it for our good. The question might arise, for what reason are some born in happiness and some in misery? They have done neither good nor evil to be treated so unequally. True, they have done nothing in this life. They are only just born. But they had done good or evil in previous lives. The consequence of what was done in the previous life has to be experienced in this life. Now, we can arrive at two conclusions on which all sects of Hinduism are agreed. The Buddhists and the Jains also accept these two. Every one of us has a firm belief that life is eternal. It could not have originated from nothing. That is impossible. If it has come out of inert slime or mud, it would have been inert and inactive. All things put together will disintegrate. All that is bound by time will end in time. If life started only yesterday, it cannot last beyond tomorrow. If it has roots, the roots shall go dry and trees cannot survive forever. Life must have been existent ever since the cosmos has been in existence. It does not require argument to understand this truth. Do we not see that all modern sciences are tending to confirm more and more assuringly and clearly the revelations made in the texts and scriptures of Bharat? This too has to be accepted some day. As authoritative texts of the basic beliefs of Bharatiya culture in the spiritual field, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita, the Prasthanatrayas, or the three sources, have to be reckoned. Many in India feel that the Advaita Vedanta alone is the correct one. But this attitude is not a correct one. The Upanishads are the very voice of Ishvara. The Brahma Sutra is the supreme embodiment of the principles and doctrine propounded by Vyasa. It is the most important of the texts depicting philosophic doctrines. It harmonizes the entire body of philosophic beliefs. Though based on earlier texts and dissertations, there is no conflict between the earlier and later. In the aphorisms of the Brahma Sutras, each conclusion attains fulfillment and reconciliation. The Bhagavad Gita acts like a commentary provided by God for Vedanta. All sects of Hinduism who claim to be authentic and orthodox accept the three sources as their basic texts, whether they are Dvaitins, Vishishtadvaitins, or Advaitins, that is, dualists, qualified non-dualists, or non-dualists. Whoever desired to propagate a new interpretation or a new attitude or theory, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya, or Chaitanya, had to propagate it through commentaries from that standpoint on the three sources, the Prasthanatraya only. Therefore, to assert that Vedanta can be used only with reference to the Upanishads and the doctrines that they teach will be a great mistake. All conclusions drawn from the Prasthanatraya are genuine and deserve the name Vedanta. Vishishtadvaita as well as Dvaita have as much claim to be known as Vedanta as Advaita. This unity in diversity, this harmony of difference, this is the core of the current of Bharatiya thought. There is milk in the body of the cow. The milk has ghee in it, but the cow cannot derive any strength through that ghee. The milk has to be taken out of the animal. It has to be boiled, and a little sour curd poured into it in order to curdle it. Then, when the milk is transformed into curds, it has to be churned and butter separated and rolled. Afterwards, the butter has to be melted and clarified to get the ghee. The ghee thus prepared can be fed to the cow, and then it would be rendered stronger. So too, just consider. God is omnipresent. Yet, He is not amenable to man unless man does sadhana. There is oil in the sesame seed. There is butter in milk. There is water underground. There is fire latent in wood. Similarly, the omnipresent God is in the human body and the human mind. When we seek to separate Him and identify Him, one has to make efforts and do sadhana. Then, as a consequence of the effort and the sadhana, one will realize that God is oneself, and there is no difference between the two. This is liberation, wisdom, realization, according to Advaita. Shankara names this process the upasana of Advaita. Now, about the upasana in Vishishta Advaita. Is the sadhaka to consider the God whom he yearns to adore as different and separate from him, or as a part of him, associated somehow with him? This is the question. Now for the answer. The jiva is the soul of the body. God is the soul of the Jiva. Having one's faith fixed thus, adoring God is the means that Ramanuja has propagated. All this cosmos is part of him. It is in him. He is the inner motivator, and he is present in all. That Supreme Person can be won only through unflinching devotion, prapatti, sharanagati, total surrender. Tvameva sarvam mamadeva deva. You are my all, O my God of gods. You are my only master. This is the attitude one has to develop and make one's own. The upasana, that is, the sitting near, the steady worship of Dvaita. The Jivatma and the Paramatma relationship is as wife-husband relationship. The full, free, supreme Vishnu is the husband, the master, the lord, the ruler, the provider. The individual is the ruled, the dependent, the wife. This method of sadhana has been taught by Madhvacharya. Without devoted attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord, that is to say, without bhakti, liberation from the cycle of samsara, why, even purity of intellect and emotions is impossible of attainment. For those who have the spring of ecstatic devotion to the presence of the Lord within them, though they may not have any texts to ponder over, the very contemplation of the beauty, grace and power of the Lord will give them bliss of superconscious bhakti. One cannot discover what prompts the experience. In that ecstatic mood, they discard all sense of shame and personality and yearn to become the beloved of God in blissful union. They will then dance and sing aloud and be merged in genuine joy and ananda. Sadhana in conformity with this faith have been laid down by Madhvacharya. The agony of the lover to attain the beloved is the true sign of Dvaitopasana, that is, worship using external means in the dualistic philosophy. This has been elaborated in 1,000 ways by others who came after. The upasana laid down in the Gita is incorporated in the Mahabharata, named as the 5th Veda. The Mahabharata is a veritable treasure house of gems, illumining the problems that confront man in worldly and spiritual matters. The Mahabharata is a magnificent drama that was enacted by Sri Krishna on the stage called Dharmakshetra, that is, the field of Dharma, where he had collected together all the items he needed for the production. Madhava, that is to say Krishna, was director who collected the participants, the cast, the songs each had to sing, the words each had to utter, and decided on the exits and the entrances. He was the actor, the witness, the producer, all roles were he. On one side, immeasurable worldly power soaked in unrighteousness. On the other side, righteousness-filled, unlimited Atmic power. This is the essential charm of the Mahabharata. This is the Bhagavad Gita. The entire essence of the Mahabharata is in it. Karishye vachanam tava. I shall do exactly as you order. One can find safety and happiness in doing one's own duties. Swadharme nidhanam shreya. These are the touchstones of worldly dharma. Neglecting the path of bhakti, which can add unto you all prosperity and progress. Those who close their eyes and contemplate on Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, and suffer from the egoism it confers, get only misery as their reward. If husk is pounded, no rice can be secured. Having no faith in Krishna's words, if one goes as his intellect dictates, it cannot be the road that leads to ultimate truth, the Brahma Tattva. The Bhagavad Gita has itself taught beyond the possibility of doubt, by means of illustrative descriptions and incidents, that Krishna is Parabrahmam itself. It is the essence of all Vedantas. It is the repository of the Amrit, the nectar, churned out of the entire collection of Shastras. It is the sacred stream of Indian spiritual thought held in one text. Is there anyone who can deny this?